Long days, pleasant nights, and welcome to Kingslingers, a Doof Media podcast journeying through Stephen King's Dark Tower series. My name is Scott Daly, and I really don't want to do this one.
Me neither. I don't have a joke for you here, other than, like, why did you do this to me?
I'm really sorry, but
Well,
if we think about it, it was really Stephen King that did this to you.
and I feel like the question of why did you do this to me is somewhat central to, like, what King is doing with the book. So
yeah, definitely. This week on the show, the Battle of Algul Siento, the battle for the beam, finally begins. Our Ka-tet wins the fight, but at a terrible price. The life of Eddie Dean. We're reading Part 2, Devar-Toi, chapters 11 and 12. We will be concluding Part 2 this week. And Matt, I think I already know the answer to this question, but what did you think of this week's reading?
it was real sad. And it was, we're going to go into it in detail, I think, but basically King tells you, going to make you sad, going to make you real sad. It's going to be awful. And then he does it. Mm-hmm. And that's actually kind of amazing, because normally if somebody tells you it's going to be sad in advance, you're like, yeah, I think I can handle it. But he still manages to land, I think, pretty much every hit that he wants to land regardless. So
yeah, and I think we could make the argument that the punches are a little more acute because he's told you where he's going to hit you first. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, maybe so.
Yeah, this is a rough couple of chapters to read. I've been dreading it since we started this book, and it's been I knew it was coming. Like I could see these chapters approaching, and I just really didn't want to get here, but we're here. It was the thing about it, and I think we're going to get into this in a second, is that it doesn't get easier on reread. It almost gets harder, because not only do you know it's coming, but you know exactly how it's coming, and it's just a brutal couple of chapters that, honestly, like, as much as we're going to be talking about how sad this is and how devastated we both were, it's just beautifully written. It's beautifully constructed, like, just from a technical perspective. Like, these are some of the best writing that I think Stephen King has ever done. And I'm being a little over the top there, but not entirely.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's really fascinating, because one thing that I notice in all of these discussions that we are sort of tangentially part of, or all the feedback we get, it comes up a lot that many people reread the Dark Tower series. And
yes,
I mean, I definitely am going to. But it's interesting, because it's like, would as many people reread the Dark Tower if it didn't have these terribly heartbreaking moments? And like, I'm like 100% sure the answer is no, not really, because the heartbreaking moments are the things that give this whole story the feeling that it has, right?
Yeah,
That I mean, in a certain sense, we seek out these, like, this is what we seek out in fiction, is this ability to make us feel things strongly, even if it's sorrow.
Sure.
So yeah, so I mean, this is going to be hard to talk about because it's heavy, but like, this is kind of the point of why there is a Dark Tower series in a certain sense. Yeah,
I totally agree with that. I think one of the other fun things about rereading is you get to return to these characters. Like, it was such a joy, and it always is a joy for me to meet Eddie Dean all over again, right? He's this wonderful character that we're going to have a lot to say about this week, and this is the end that he meets, but, like, I got to meet him with you again, and re-experience his life through you, and that's an absolute joy. Even knowing where that whole train is taking us, it's all part of it. It's all part of it, and I think it sounds cliche to say, but you're always hoping that maybe things will play out differently this time around on your rereads, and that has yet to happen for me. Just has anyone experienced this book when Eddie Dean doesn't die? No, it's impossible, right? That's part of the wheel of Ka, right? It's always going to end this way, but it doesn't make it feel any better.
Unless you woke up in a slightly different Earth with a slightly different Dark Tower.
Touche. All right, let's stop. We're just postponing the inevitable here. I think we're trying not to get into the discussion itself by talking around it, but let's just jump into it, Matt. And let's start with chapter 11, The Attack on Algul Siento. We begin our long-awaited action set piece back in the brain of the incomparable Pimley Prentice, who I believe you now have all the reasons in the world to absolutely despise, right, Matt?
Yeah, I'd say so. Although I think King is not necessarily just making us want to despise him. But I'll talk more about what I mean by that in a bit.
Sure. What I do love about this opening scene, though, is that it kind of tracks Pimley's damn Colt 45 or 40 Peacemaker, a Peacemaker name, which has never had so much irony as it does in this moment here. On reread, like the first time you see the gun, it becomes this ominous doom signaling for a person that's read the story before, because that's the gun. It's this gun, and King is drawing your attention to it. But I think the thing that I love about what King is doing here is that all that still works, even if this is your first time through. But I'll let you speak to that more, because it is your first time through.
Yeah. So there's a bunch to say about the Peacemaker. I mean, so the first thing that comes to mind is like, it really evokes a very specific visual aesthetic, because the original Colt Peacemaker is this giant 13-inch military handgun from the 1870s. Like, it's a gigantic gun. And like, for some reason, I see it as being the gun used by villains. That maybe it's because of like the Mask of Zorro, where pretty sure the bad guy has this giant revolver.
Sure.
So like it just has a very villainous kind of mental image for me, and I don't know, maybe that's unusual that I happen to have that mental image, but that's what works for me. And then of course the next thing to note is like, King is using the weapon as a kind of flag for something bad that's going to happen. It's a continuation of the Kashum idea from last week. We know something bad's going to happen. We know somebody's going to die. The book tells us it's going to be this gun that does it. And so we're tracking the gun throughout. It's this object that King has given us to focus on as the details and the chaos swirl about. We're still tracking the gun. Okay, where's the gun? Has the gun gone off yet? Has the shoe dropped yet? No, it hasn't. Okay, there's the gun, right? Because if, you could frame it as a question. You could say, what would this reading experience have been like if King never pointed out the Peacemaker, right? If King never pointed out the Peacemaker and made it relevant, then you rereading the story would know, oh, here's the Peacemaker. This is the gun that kills Eddie. But because he points out the Peacemaker, makes the battle feel very different. It directs our attention, because I, the first time reader, am focusing on this gun. I know this is, this is literally the Chekhov's gun. This is literally, I mean, right? Like, this is the gun that has been introduced, and the author has said, this is the gun that's going to do the bad thing that I keep telling you is going to happen. And, if he hadn't framed it that way, the build up to the final moment definitely would have felt different. You wouldn't, as it is, it's coming. Like in the few paragraphs up till that moment, you're like, there he is, there's the revolver. Yep, I see where this is going,
Yeah, and he kind of manipulates you a bit, because there are these moments where like Roland shoots Pimley in the head, and we're like, wait, what? But even directly before that moment, we got this thing where the text says, and at the end of the day, Roland blamed the kind of stuttering and like waviness of his walk for why. I mean, the implication is there he missed. He was off just by a little bit, and then so the bullet that should have killed him didn't kill him. But even in that moment, you're just like, I agree. It's like, you kind of know your characters are safe as long as Pimley is around, because like it's been set up. And then when Roland is sitting there waiting for him to show up, he's like, okay, this final segment of the battle won't begin until the boss is here. And then we, the reader, are like, no. It's this great tugging and pulling on your emotions, because you're happy that the characters are winning, but this thing's about to happen and you don't know how to feel about it. It's just, I think, fantastically done.
Yeah. And I mean, zooming out, the whole idea of Kashum, the whole metatextual flag of death is imminent, a character is going to die. This whole week's reading would have felt very, very different. Especially to a first time reader, if none of that were present, right? It would just be like, all right, we're going to attack, and then they attack, and then they basically win easily, and then bam, Eddie is killed. Like, that would feel totally different from just laying on the doom and the Kashum and flagging the gun and all of these things. So yeah, I mean, basically King is going really hard. We've talked a few times throughout this podcast about the idea, the classic, and then he walked out the door and no one ever saw him again thing. But like he's using every possible tool in the tool belt, in the writer's tool belt, to do that here, to foreshadow. Foreshadow is too weak of a word, to prepare us for this death.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, there's such a difference between shock and inevitability, right? And I think the latter has so much more tragedy involved in it. And I think that's the feeling he wants you to feel in these moments. Is this is a tragic, unbearable loss. This is not like surprise. The only person that's really surprised in this whole thing is Eddie himself, and it's only in like the very moment he gets shot is their surprise. The rest of us are just like, okay, this is it. Here we go. And it makes the tone of the thing totally different. And this is what he's after with this death. This is absolutely what he's after, is he wants you to feel this horrible inevitability. I wonder how much of this book is like constructing the feeling of reread for a first time reader, because he just tells you everything. I mean, to be fair, he didn't specifically say Eddie's going to get shot. He didn't say it was going to be Eddie. That was the one surprise, is that it was going to be Eddie Dean. But that's it, really. Like everything else, we knew what the murder weapon was. We knew about when it was going to happen. The only surprise in this moment is who it is. Yeah.
And I mean, the whole statement about, death is going to come between Eddie and Roland. It's like, okay, well, I mean, he's given us a lot of arrows pointing to Eddie, but yeah, that's really interesting to consider. I mean, obviously I can't really elaborate on that until after I'm done, and you can't really elaborate on it because I'm listening to you talk. But yeah, it'll be interesting to go back like a second time through and be like, oh yeah, I mean, that, he at least foreshadowed this thing.
Sure. Yeah.
That's a fun thought.
One more thing about the gun before we move on. I do find it really interesting that the thing that King highlights most about the Peacemaker in the early going is the last time it was fired. Like over and over again throughout this chapter, we are told this is the gun that was used to kill the rapist Cameron. We got this beat several times. This is the gun that was used to execute a rapist. And I think this is really interesting because like King spotlights this multiple times, and I think this lends towards the complicated nature of Algo Ciento and the man in charge of it that we've spent almost all of last week's episode talking about. This is a terrible place, an evil place where the enemy of existence itself is gathering his forces to try and quite literally sow discord across existence. But the people here are not like your stereotypical monster, right? They aren't like these monsters cackling as the world falls around them. They're people like Pimley who are just absolutely convinced of their rightness, of their moral superiority. And so he holds this gun. And what is this gun? This is the gun that executed the rapist. This is the gun that punished a criminal for committing one of the worst crimes imaginable. It's this gun that's going to take away one of our beloved characters.
Yeah, it's really interesting. The sort of, I don't know it's not moral equivocation. It's like these characters are doing some moral equivocation. The book is not. I mean, even up to the end, Finley is like criticizing our heroes for their cowardice. Yeah. And he really thinks he's the good guy. They all think they're the good guys, like you said. And that really heavy compartmentalization happening, especially amongst the humans. That's a theme that I guess we'll just keep talking about it as we go. I'm not exactly sure what to do with this idea in this moment.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot to say. I think when the battle starts proper, I have a lot I want to say about that. So we'll just put a pin in that and move on. Cool. So we get to this one part where King kind of lays it out, I think, as you were talking about, where he basically tells you, where it says he slipped the 40 into his docker's clutch almost without thinking, so moving us a step closer to what you will not want to hear and I will not want to tell. So just as a side note, I started my read of this section on Christmas Eve, and this is like the third page, and I got to that line and I was like, nope, I'm out. I'm not going to read this right now. I put the book away and I was like, I'm done. And I came back to it later in the week. It's just one of those lines where I couldn't do it. I just couldn't do it. I just knew this is the first chink in what is going to be the horrible, horrible moments of Eddie's death. And I just couldn't do it. I couldn't do it.
Yeah. And I mean, that line is of course worth talking about, because for, you know, I don't know how many times it's been, but not that many times that our author has used the first person pronoun in the middle of this book, you know, very clearly reminding us like, hey, I'm telling you a story. I'm drawing your attention here and there. And sometimes he slips into that mode where he's like, pay attention now to this detail, right? But this is him saying, I don't want to tell this, right? Which is really fascinating because he wrote it. It's his idea.
But is it?
That's what's really fascinating, right? Is like part of you wants to be like, you didn't have to kill him. You didn't have to do it. But it's like, well, yeah, he did though. I mean, it's so interesting because I really do. There's more to say. There's more to say about this later. But
we're doing this thing where we're jumping ahead to the final event because like so much of this chapter revolves around it. But no, I totally agree with you, and I know where you're going with this, and I can't wait to really wrestle with it because it's difficult. It is. Yeah,
I think at this point we just have to sort of put pins in all of the thematic things that are happening, and then move on, and then we talk about them when they kind of explode in our face.
So to calm their increasing nerves, Pimley and Finley decide to head down to the Damley house to check out the deep telemetry readings again, because something is not right. I love the detail here, Matt, where nobody actually knows what deep telemetry is measuring. They just know that like if there is a teleporter around, it would show up on the measurements theoretically. It's kind of this really fascinating slavery to technology that you don't understand, and they're totally reliant on it here, which of course blows up in their faces as it seems to always do in these novels. Like this complete reliance on technology seems to blow up in people's faces constantly.
Yeah, I love the idea of like just a machine that just it measured something, we don't know what, so oh well.
Yeah, we think we're good, but I don't know. Yeah. On their way to the Damley house, though, they bump into a child of Roderick. It's actually Halus, the rod that Roland had summoned during our episode last week. He's got a basket full of used Kleenex tissues, and the two guards laugh about how gross and pathetic Halus is. It's actually one final moment of our Finley and Pimley situation comedy that we saw back in the chapters last week. And there's this great dramatic irony layered on top of it, though, because the reason the basket only has used tissues in it is because their child of Roderick, Halus, has already delivered the bombs to the little areas around the compound. He's already done his job. And so we have these two characters just like, this guy sucks. And little do they know that their doom has already been delivered by this person they're dismissing.
Yeah, the little dip into Halus's POV in a bit is fascinating. A fascinating little insight into child of Roderick life. It sounds absolutely miserable.
Yeah, totally.
But yeah, I think you're exactly right about you know how all of that works. So I just want to briefly say, Scott, we've been doing this long enough for me to know when people are going to want to yell at me. So like, I think people might want to yell at me for talking about how adorable Pimley and Finley are, because they're awful. Obviously, they're monsters and they kill our boy. But like obviously they suck. I agree with you. They do. But just look at this. Look at how it's written. Like King absolutely is bending over backwards to get you to understand these guys are buds. These guys are bros. They have this long history of trust and friendship and this implicit understanding. It's a comedy beat. A lot of their interactions are comedy beats, but also, as always, you have to ask, why is King doing it this way? Why is he depicting these villains who really are objectively terrible and who are going to do this terrible thing as having this like genuine friendship, this genuine camaraderie? I mean, I definitely the most genuine friendship we've seen between villainous characters in this series.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, there's even a moment at the end of this where Roland like sees the two of them, like he sees Pimley reach for Finley as they're both like about to be shot and killed. And it's like this reach of friendship, of protection, of protecting each other in this final moment. And yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right that I don't think people are going to yell at you for this, Matt, because I think it's just right there in the text. Like, King knows what he's doing, and he didn't have to do it this way. And he is absolutely making you identify and kind of like this friendship between these two characters.
Yeah. I mean, you even have some level of understanding of like when Eddie kills Finley, you're like, well, Finley's definitely going to kill him now. Like, just even if it costs him his life, right? Like, and that's what's so fascinating is his death arises from what is sort of a very understandable, like, human feeling. You know, it's not. I don't know. We'll talk more about it when it actually happens, I guess. But
sure.
It's interesting how the guy who kills one of our main characters is not one of the many just straight up, you know, horrible monsters. He's not one of these sort of selfish psychopathic characters we've run across. He's one of the banality of evil types. Who actually has a friend, you know. It's just really interesting. I don't know if I know why, you know. I don't know if I know why exactly King chose this either. But maybe we'll figure it out as we go.
Yeah, I mean, I think it has to go back to our conversation about the ways in which our protagonist is reflected in the enemies that stand before him, right? And the ways in which he is similar and the ways in which he is different to those people. So, I mean, to me, Pimley reads like a version of Roland, a version of Roland that is maybe better at fooling himself. I don't know.
Yeah, sure.
But this interaction with the child of Roderick, I think, is actually really important to something that King is doing here throughout this chapter. It's this moment in which things get really close to going awry, right? You know, what are the odds that Pimley and Finley stumble upon the very child of Roderick that was assigned this task by Roland, and that the entire plan hinges on? It seems like they're in trouble for a second here, and then everything goes okay. And like you said earlier, Roland and his Ka-tet win this battle, and they do so relatively easily, at least until Eddie is shot at the end of it. And it seems like it's because Ka is on their side. Basically, everything they planned goes off without a hitch. And every moment where something could go wrong, like Pimley and Finley stumbling upon this rod, doing a check on telemetry that wasn't part of their original plan, it always breaks our Ka-tet's way. It always breaks for our good guys. You know, we have this moment later where these two people are arguing, these two housekeepers are arguing, and so they don't smell the fire as quickly as they would have if they were not arguing with each other. We have the moments where these fire engines suddenly appear, and we're like, oh shit, that could ruin everything. And no, it actually helps because they just drive crazily into buildings and make the fire worse. So everything is breaking their way until the moment where it stops doing that suddenly and shockingly.
Yeah, I think it really plays with our sense of dread, this dread that King has been building, because we know to a near certainty that something terrible is going to happen. And we almost want this to be the tension break, right? We almost want this to be the moment. Like, we see these two arguing, and part of us is like, okay, something's going to go wrong. And then after it goes wrong, we can be like, okay, good. Now I know, like, this is the bad thing that's going to happen, and this is what I've been dreading. But instead of that happening, nothing goes wrong. Everything goes right. And thus we're just, the dread stays hovering over us. Even as the Ka-tet just keeps winning and winning, we don't enjoy it. We're like, okay, just like you know, the tension is just increasing, if anything, right?
Yeah.
They're winning harder and harder, and your anxiety is increasing because you know that the terrible thing hasn't happened yet.
It's insane how much the actual minute to minute moments of the battle are secondary to your concern about who's going to die and when. And King has set it up this way. And if you think about it, a lot of the action sequences in the series play out that way. Like the end of Wizard and Glass, the fight between Jonas and Roland, like Susan is about to be killed, and we know it's coming. We know Susan's death is coming. And so as much as we're in the minute-to-minute action sequences of that fight, all we're thinking about is Susan and Roland, and knowing that Roland's not going to get to her in time. And it's a very similar thing here to where, like, yes, we're following the action. And I think the action, I'm not saying the action isn't written well here, but like, it's not the focal point. It's the surface layer that our worry and concern is boiling beneath.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, this very much does remind me of that battle. Like, I'm reminded how, Jonas kind of goes out like a chump, how Roland's old Ka-tet just blows away this huge group of guys, and how we're sort of robbed of the satisfaction of that, because we know that in the end they're going to basically lose. They win the battle, but they lose the more important thing. Their Ka-tet is broken, and that's very similar, actually.
Yep.
It also reminds me of what Pimley kept saying over and over last week about, you want to, what was the aphorism? You want to be careful of the eggs when you're almost home.
Yeah.
Because that's literally what happens here, is like they won the battle, but they hadn't finished, right? They hadn't wrapped a bow on it. And then they broke an egg, right?
Yep.
That's exactly what the Ka-tet did. I really do think King was sort of playing that into things, right? This idea that like you want to be even more careful near the end of the thing. Well, they weren't even more careful toward the end of the thing. They thought they were done, but they were still angry people on the battlefield, and they let their guard down, and that was all it took.
Oh, there's so many things I want to talk about this if we haven't gotten there yet, because there's a lot going on in that moment. We'll get there though.
Okay.
So we then go through a series of vignettes as we wait for the fires to begin. We see from Susanna's point of view, then Eddie's, then back to the house help of Pimley's, then to the deputy security chief, then over to Ted, then Dinky, then we rest back with Pimley Prentice. We're kind of jumping around in very quick, like page-long sections here. And King very much constructs this almost cinematic feeling here, right? The tension here and the calm before the storm, as he very specifically cuts away from perspectives just when they smell the smoke or when they hear the alarms for the first time. That's when we cut it, when the tension is about to break and things are about to explode, literally or figuratively. That's when King cuts away from it and moves on to the next scene that kind of builds this tension. It's really wonderful. And what I love about it is that because Stephen King has taken the time to get us to understand what this place is, who the people in charge of it are, who the people that are trying to bring it down are, and who the other random breakers are, he's able to cut around rather quickly without losing the plot, without losing focus on what's going on. We understand all these people. And even if it's to new characters that we've never really been in the head of before, like the deputy security chief, we know who he is in the hierarchy. We understand how this works, and we can just kind of roll with it.
Absolutely. Yeah. This whole section is a masterclass in, as you say, cutting around between a number of distinct characters and locations without ever losing you for an instant.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And it's fun too. Like there is dread here, and you're absolutely right. There's dread here, but there are parts of this chapter that are enjoyable. Like despite what we know is going to happen at the end, like it's kind of fun seeing these characters realize just moments too late that they're fucked. Like I think there's this moment here where Pimley says like the word attack hadn't even entered Pimley's mind at this point. And it's kind of enjoyable. Like you get to ride this wave of like, things are working out.
I agree completely. Like I think that's one thing we're saying is like we've talked about the dread and the tension and everything, but like it's definitely fun. Even though something terrible is going to happen, it's definitely a fun battle. Like this isn't The Road, this isn't a book where you're just like feel sick while reading it. Like I think King does make us feel just really awful later, but during this particular scene we're just having fun. I agree with that.
Yeah. And I like our Ka-tet, despite ourselves, despite Kashum, despite everything we've been told and everything King has hinted towards, our Ka-tet kicks ass, and we're seeing them kick ass again. So there's this feeling of, okay, we're gonna do it again. Like, certainly none of our characters are gonna die, right? No, I mean, he said it, but like, it's not gonna happen. That's not how this works. So I think he allows you to get sucked into the moment to moment of the action sometimes, where you're just enjoying it, even though maybe in the back of your head this nagging feeling of dread is still there, and you're trying to push it away.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I love it. I love it so much.
Me too.
So as soon as the alarms go off, Dinky Earnshaw, who's hanging out in the study, starts broadcasting a message to his breaker friends, trying to calm them down, trying to soothe them and lead them out of the study and out of danger. The line, "Go south with your hands up, you won't be hurt," starts, and it plays over and over again. And this is, I think, Matt, another way in which King taking literally 150 pages to set this whole place up pays off to me. We understand who these breakers are at this point, so King doesn't have to explain to us why this psychic go south like message would work, right? These people listen to Dinky's commands on habit because they are the type of people that just roll with anything, right? Mm-hmm. This has been established. And so we already understand why this would work perfectly.
Yeah, exactly. I agree completely. Like the idea that these type of people would just be like, oh, okay, like it seems fishy, but whatever. Like that's totally understood, totally believable.
Yep. And then we have this line that I want to spend some time talking to you about, because Finley says, "Come on, boss, we have to make sure the breakers are okay." And I love this because the universal reality of this battle seems almost the opposite of the way things would normally be constructed in a heroic good guys versus bad guys battle. The bad guys, their goal in this fight are to keep the breakers safe. The good guys, on the other hand, aren't like going out of their way to kill the breakers, but like if a few breakers die inside of burning buildings, or if a few of the breakers get hit by crossfire, that's fine with them. Like that doesn't spoil their plans. Like, they are there to stop the breakers from breaking the beam. That is their goal. And so whichever way is fine. And so our bad guys are the ones trying to protect them, trying to keep them safe, trying to make sure they get out of the fire, trying to make sure they don't touch the electric fence. Those are the ones that are concerned with the life and well-being of the breakers. And our Ka-tet is just like, I mean, yeah, we're not going to like shoot them, but like, if a fire truck runs over a couple of them,
yeah,
that's fine.
Yeah. If I just spray a building with machine gun fire. I think this is another note of making it so that Pimley and Finley specifically are not just monsters. So like, imagine that you cut this section out of the book, this week's reading. Imagine you just cut this week's reading out of the book and you hand it to somebody who's never heard of the Dark Tower, and you just ask them to read just this section by itself. They don't know who Roland and Eddie and Pimley and Finley are. Is it necessarily clear to them who the good guys are supposed to be? Like, just based on this bit, or let's just call it the first half up until Eddie gets shot. Like, is it clear based on this bit, without the context of what the breakers are doing? And I know that's not like a fair question, but it's like, I think that you're onto something about like the way this battle has been set up is really supposed to put us in a very weird and unusual frame of mind with respect to, these particular characters.
Yeah. I mean, every superhero story, every Superman story, for example, Superman's weakness is that he cares more about the random people around the battle than the villains do, right? That Superman, he might be stronger and faster, but he has to go out of his way to save the people, to make sure that there are no dead innocents in this fight. And that is his weakness that villains exploit over and over and over again. And in the construction of this battle is the absolute opposite of that, where, again, our Ka-tet is not, we do not see them use we do not see them leverage this fact as a weakness, because they're not bad people. But it is true that like the breakers die in this fight, and that is not something that spoils their plans. Right?
Yeah, exactly. Like that's part of the I have less clear thoughts on this really, but like I guess the book has been fairly clear that like a gunslinger is not Superman. A gunslinger is like kind of like a killer. He's a steely-eyed son of a bitch, and some eggs are going to get broken, but it's not going to stop him from accomplishing his goal. Particularly Roland among all gunslingers, like he's just the guy he's gonna break all of the eggs. If there's a dozen eggs in there, he's gonna break all of them just to make sure the omelet is big enough. So like, yeah, he's at no point does the story get confused about the idea that, you know, Roland is not a good guy. He may be a hero, but yeah. And anyway, like, yeah, having that element and then the element that our villains here are like the least villainous villains in the entire story, it just creates a really interesting situation.
Yeah, 100%. But it is finally time for Susanna to do her part as she starts to open fire on the guardhouses at the north end, cutting in and out of the Dead of Walker voice as she does it, which I think goes, you know, you were just talking about that gunslingers are steely-eyed sons of bitches, and the gunslinger that is Susanna is the one that channels Dead of Walker when it comes time to do the shooting, right? Like that's been true from the very beginning, from the second book, the moment that Roland saw Dead of Walker and said, you know, we could use someone like this. Like that is, you're absolutely right that these are who these gunslingers are. And King does not want us to forget this.
Yeah, exactly.
So Susanna rides around activating lasers and blowing away bad guys, and she loves it so much that she almost accidentally blows away Shimi by shooting bullets into the top of the dorm house that he's currently hanging out in. And only because he was on his knees praying was he safe from her bullet fire.
That's not great.
No.
Yeah. I mean, as you say, some ambiguity here. And I don't want to break the flow here, but worth noting that she's the one who blows out all the glass, and it's the shard of glass that stabs Shimi in the foot, which is apparently going to be his doom. So there's there's a literal direct A to B connection between those two things. Like if she hadn't just gone off and started spraying her machine gun all over the place, then I think it's fair to say that Shimi would not have died.
Perhaps, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think the text wants us to think that, at least. And we don't know what's going to happen to Shimi. You do, I don't, but we'll see.
So we cut over to Roland on the south end of the compound. They take out the guards there and cut through the fence and enter Main Street, Devar-Toi, Pleasantville. This, we learn, is where our final showdown will begin. And I love this little bit. I think the reason I pulled this is just because it's from Eddie, and I know he's only got a few more minutes to live here. But here in Pleasantville, Eddie couldn't help but think of the main street in Disneyland. No litter in the gutters, no rude graffiti on the walls, not even any dust on the plate glass windows. This was where homesick breakers came when they needed a little whiff of America, he supposed. But didn't any of them want anything better, anything more realistic than this plastic, fantastic still life? Maybe it looked more inviting with folks on the sidewalk and in the stores, but that was hard to believe. Hard for him to believe, at least. Maybe it was only a city boy's chauvinism. And so I don't know. I love this moment of Eddie just kind of looking at the fakeness of this thing. And I think it is significant that this fake constructed version of 1950s America, this Disneylandification of America, is where our final showdown happens and is where Eddie dies in this fake constructed version of something. I think there's something kind of haunting to that.
Yeah, that is really interesting. We've had a lot of locations that felt like they were kind of echoes or kind of creepy refractions of America or Americana, perhaps. And so I agree that I kind of want to sit down and go through all of the settings of the story at some point and talk about, like, what is the specific, not through line, that's not the right word, but like the idea that King is playing with in choosing all of these settings. Because like last week we talked about the idea that like a post-apocalypse that's just chock full of robots trying to keep doing their jobs despite the fact that their jobs are irrelevant is such an interesting and unique and kind of unexpected way of doing things. And here we have another kind of, it's a prison. What does a prison look like? Oh, it looks like Disneyland. There's definitely a very interesting and I feel purposeful drive behind the way that King is constructing all of these strange settings.
Yeah, story. I mean, to get a bit meta for a bit, I mean, it is interesting. Like Eddie's New York City is a construction as well, right? It's not real; it's fake. It came from the mind of Stephen King, but it is a construction of New York City that is brutal and cruel, and had Eddie's sister die by getting hit by a car, and had him and his brother, addicted to heroin, and it is not a fun construction of Americana. And I think it shows maybe the difference between our breakers and our Ka-tet here, in that like that's where they grew up, that's where they were created to live in. But this, for these people, this is what's created because this is what they want. They want this, and I think it's fitting that Eddie Dean sees this and it's like it's gross to him. Like it's just like, this is awful. Like why would you ever want something like this? Why would you ever want this fake idealized version of what living in this world is? I find it really interesting.
Yeah, absolutely.
Then we get to this part. It's another quote I have to read. Any battle seasoned general will tell you that even in a small scale engagement, as this one was, there always comes a point where coherence breaks down and narrative flow and any real sense of how things are going. These matters are recreated by historians later on. The need to recreate the myth of coherence may be one of the reasons why history exists in the first place. Never mind. We have reached that point, the one where the Battle of Algul-Ciento took on a life of its own, and all I can do now is point here and there and hope you can bring your own order out of the general chaos. King then proceeds to reconstruct the history of the Battle of Algul-Ciento by using a series of quick cuts between events, and it's all punctuated by the use of and then an M dash. So like basically the rest of the battle is just a series of really, he's not even doing section breaks anymore. It's just like, and this happened, and this happened, and this happened. And it's so funny because it's so goddamn effective, isn't it? It really is.
It's hilariously effective. I mean, I think it's actually funny how he's like, oh, you're not going to be able to keep track. It'll be chaos. And then he just presents us with this excellent sequence of events where it's chaos in the sense that we're rapidly jumping around in terms of geography and characters. But, we don't have a full picture. But there is a certain thread. There is a certain larger picture that's being painted for us by taking these little snapshots from here and there. There is a certain, in my opinion, unbroken line of narrative propulsion that we're following, regardless of the fact that we're jumping around physically. It worked for me really well. Like at no point did I feel confused or lost or like, oh, I don't know how this is going. Like it always felt like it was going the Ka-tet's way, for one thing. So
I think it's so funny. He basically says like, this is not how things actually happened, but this is how I've reconstructed and recreated it to give some narrative coherence to these events. Which is fascinating because like it's all made up, but like he talks to us again. King talks to us again. Never mind. We have reached that point. All I can do now is point here and there and hope you can bring your own order out of the general chaos. That's not true. You could have just told us you could have just, you made it up. You could have done it any way you wanted to, but I love that he chose to paint it realistic in this way, that like, this is a real battle and all I can do is pick pieces here and there and hope you can bring your own order to it.
Yeah, that's a good point, because once again, he's doing the thing where he's addressing us directly, but he's addressing us in a way where it's like, this is a real event that really happened, and I'm going to do my best. But it's like, no, you just made this up. Obviously, you could change the order of events so that they made more sense, but he's not going to do that because that would be bad storytelling. He wants it to be organic.
Yep. So we see the command structure break down as people panic. We see the breakers get mowed over by fire trucks. We see fires and explosions and chaos. We see Ted throw another mine spear, the first that he's thrown in 35 years. This one at his old friend Trampus. He concentrated and felt a sick pain rip through his head. The mine spear flew. Trampus let go of Dinky and gave Ted a look of unbelieving reproach that Ted will remember to the end of his life.
Oh man. this bit, I admit, did fly past me so fast that I wasn't even really sure what had happened to Trampas, but the first time through at least, because but yeah, I mean, it feels especially bigger after our conversation last week where we gave Trampas credit for being like more humane and you know, giving Ted information he didn't need to give him and all of that. And it's, you know, no good deed goes unpunished type thing. more ambiguity, I guess, is what I'm saying. Like Trampas is like the one guy, the one bad guy that we're like, well, there seems to be a spark of some goodness in him was kind of what I said last week. And it's like, nah, he's dead now.
Yeah. And he, and it's Ted that kills him. It's not just that Trampas dies, it's that his friend, and despite himself, I think Ted would have called Trampas an actual friend. And yeah, like a look of unbelieving reproach, like, you to me.
Yeah.
Ted would remember. Like, this is not a thing he's going to get over. He's going to remember that look for the rest of his life.
Yeah.
And it's awful. I mean, first of all, it's Mind Spear, right? Like, this is the thing that he did that haunted him, that caused him to run, that turn into this lifestyle of running away from everything that led directly to him coming here. It's a thing that he is disgusted by himself doing. And he's done it again here against someone he would call a friend, and this time intentionally. Yeah.
Is there an implication that Ted is like one of the few, or maybe the only, that can do this particular trick, or is that not implied anywhere? Because I couldn't really decide either way.
Yeah, I mean, I think we don't get to see a lot of what all the other breakers are capable of. I think it's pretty clear that Ted is above and beyond many of them. I don't think it ever specifically says the others couldn't do this. Mm-hmm. We don't see them do it though, so I think it's fair to make that assumption.
I think the reason why I can't decide is like at some point, basically, I believe it's maybe Dinky, maybe Ted, who says like the breakers could absolutely, you know, break out of this prison if they wanted to. They're more than strong enough to do that as a group, but they're not going to, because they have no community and they have no will to do that.
Yeah.
So, but anyway,
so everyone could just be mind spearing people all over the place if they wanted to.
But they don't, because they're selfish and cowardly.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that was my thought, is like maybe they can all do it and they just want to, but they'd rather just keep their heads down, you know?
Yeah, it's possible. Sure. Yeah. So last we see Shimi, who rushes outside to tell everyone that they've done it, that the beam is safe. Even here in the middle of the battle, they've already done enough to ensure that the beam is safe, and the beam has told Shimi. And then we get this part. He looked around, as happy as Ebenezer Scrooge, discovering that the spirits had done it all in one night, and ran for the door with his slippers crunching on the broken glass. One sharp spear of glass pierced his foot, carrying his death on its tip. Had he but known it, say sorry, say Discordia. But in his joy, he didn't even feel it.
I'm sad.
I know. Poor Shimi. I mean, this is such a sad chapter because Eddie dies, but Shimi has just been given his doom here and nobody even notices it. And then King, for the rest of both these chapters, King will like constantly go back to, and yeah, Shimi was limping, but everyone was too distracted to notice Shimi's limping. No one's paying attention to the fact that Shimi's limping. It's such a low on the totem pole worry compared to everything else that's going on.
Yeah. It really feels like a unfair gut punch too, because we've been told over and over and over a Ka-tet member is going to die. You're going to be really sad because a Ka-tet member is going to die. And then out of left field, he just sucker punches you and says, "Oh yeah, also Shimi's going to die." Mm-hmm. You're like, "Shit, you didn't like you didn't warn me about that. God damn it!" So that like I mean, in a certain, you know, twisted way, it's very clever, right? To draw your attention over here to the dreadful thing that's going to happen, and that dreadful thing does happen. But in the meantime, he's totally made something also bad happen where you weren't looking.
Sure, yeah, and it's true too. Like I think the writing here reflects our feeling, because we're more concerned about the tragedy of Eddie Dean's death. That like, yeah, Shimi dies and we're sad about that, but like Eddie Dean is the more immediate concern of the reader as well.
True.
So the breakers head south and into the alley off of the main street as all the guards follow them. As Pimley finally joins the fight and walks down the alley, Roland sees him, and then we get this. He went to the weasel, weaving slightly from side to side. It was this drunken weave that Roland would later blame in his bitter heart for the final outcome of that morning's work, probably meaning to take command of the operation. Their short but fervent embrace, both giving comfort and taking it, told Roland all he needed to know about the closeness of their relationship. And so this is what we were talking about before, where the king takes the time to point out and to have our protagonist point out that these two are very close. They're friends, they're allies, they're buddies, they're partners in every sense of the word, and they're about to be slaughtered.
Yeah. Yeah. And, when one of them is killed, you understand the reaction of the other, right?
Yeah, yeah. And I think the other important thing here is that Roland blames the weave here, presumably meaning that Pimley weaved at the last moment as Roland fired on him, and so the bullet that should have killed him instantly left him alive long enough to pull out his gun and do his terrible act. But that means that Roland missed, right? Yeah. Ever so slightly he missed. And that is unusual for our gunslinger. He has incredibly accurate aim at all times.
Yeah, right. I mean, the idea of like, oh, well, he was walking weird. It's like bullets go really fast, Roland. So, so what does that mean exactly? Like, I can't think of another time that he's missed, right?
Well, and I love that the text doesn't say Roland missed because Pimley weaved. It said Roland blamed his miss on Pimley's weave. But the at the end of the day, whether it's because he was weaving when he shot at him, Roland missed a little bit. The bullet that should have killed him did not. Yeah. And that is unusual for Roland. I think like again and again we've seen that Ka is pushing things towards this victory, that these moments, that everything plays out perfectly, that every moment where something could go wrong, it goes right. But that's not all Ka is doing, right? Because Ka is pushing everything towards this other moment, this moment that we were told about at the very beginning of this chapter, where this gun was going to do its terrible act. And so we can't eliminate the person who is going to shoot that gun. So Roland has to miss just a little bit.
Yeah, it's interesting how my mind keeps going back to, and this has happened a few times, I think, in recent weeks, to the scene where Roland is giving Susanna one of her first shooting lessons, and she clips the last stone. She hits all the others. She clips the last one, and she feels bad about it. And Roland is like, well, sometimes in a firefight, just clipping a guy can be enough. And I guess the reason it's popping into my head here is like Roland probably killed a bunch of guys today, but he clipped this one. He didn't kill him. He probably gave him a fatal wound, but it wasn't enough to stop him from retaliating terribly.
Sure. Yeah, definitely. Sometimes you're wrong, Roland. Sometimes you're wrong.
Yeah.
So with Pimley, quote unquote, dead, it's time to finish this. And we have this wonderful speech here. For Gilead, for New York, for the beam, for your fathers, hear me, leave not one of them standing, kill them all. And so they did. The gunslinger out of Gilead, the former drug addict out of Brooklyn, the lonely child who had once been known to Mrs. Greta Shaw as Bama, coming south from behind them, rolling through the thickening banners of smoke on the SCT, diverting from the straight course only once to swerve around the flattened body of another housekeeper, the one named Tammy, was a fourth. She who had once been instructed in the ways of nonviolent protest by young and earnest men from the NAACP, and who had now embraced fully and with no regrets the way of the gun. So like I think King just like for the last time wanted to list all the names of the Ka-tet, right?
Yeah.
Like
the names and remind us, who they are and
where they came from.
Yeah, where they came from and now they're unity. They really are a team. They are a Ka-tet.
And it's over very quickly after this, right? It ends. They just kill them all. And the Ka-tet finds themselves alone on Main Street together.
Yeah. It feels like this amazing, perfect, sweeping victory. But, everything's been littered with the horrible portents and ominous notes that something awful is going to happen. And so there's still no relief even now. In fact, you just know, like the shape of it, I think at this point kind of took form for me, where I was like, okay, they've won, and they're going to be celebrating, and as they're celebrating, something terrible is going to happen. Like that was what popped into my head at about this point, right?
Yeah. So here's their moment of gathering. "Hey, sugar man, hey," she murmured, fluttering kisses along the side of his neck in a way that made him shiver. Then Jake was there, pale from the killing, but composed, and she slung an arm around his shoulders and pulled him close. Her eyes happened on Roland, standing on the sidewalk behind the three he had drawn to Midworld. His gun dangled beside his left thigh, and could he feel the expression of longing on his face? Did he even know it was there? She doubted it, and her heart went out to him. And then Susanna calls Roland to join their circle. Roland is in a very Mordred type way. He's outside the circle, right? And he wants to be inside that circle. He longs to be part of this group, and she calls him to it, and he comes. But Matt, here's where things get complicated, because you could argue that if Roland was not in this final circle, this final embrace of the Ka-tet being whole, perhaps he would have seen Pimley move fast enough to react to him. Like I know they like kind of break off a little bit after that, but they go their separate ways. But like, I don't know, like there's, and in Roland's head, you wonder if that's what's going through it, right? That like, every time he brings people in, every time he has a group of people, this is how it ends. This is always how it ends. Being around people just causes me to lose those people. We already know it's going to happen to Shimi again, one of his oldest friends. And it's about to happen again here.
Sure. I mean, I think in a very literal sense, like maybe Roland is hanging back, at least in part, because he knows it's not over. He's been in a million gunfights. He knows, okay, we shot all these dudes. That doesn't mean they're all dead. That doesn't mean we can just turn our backs on them and hug. But Susanna invites him to, and he does want to. He does desperately want to, and so he does it. And I mean, I don't, we don't necessarily know, like, would he have seen Pimley move? I don't know. But I think your point is valid, which is like every moment in this chapter has to go the way that it goes in order to build toward the terrible conclusion, including the good moments, right? Including all the moments where they win. So, yeah.
All right, Matt, here we go. "I'll have you see them like this. I'd have you see them very well. Will you? They are clustered around Susie's cruisin' trike, embracing in the aftermath of their victory. I'd have you see them this way, not because they have won a great battle. They know better than that, every one of them. But because now they are Ka-tet for the last time. The story of their fellowship ends here, on this make-believe street, and beneath this artificial sun. The rest of the tale will be short and brutal compared to all that's gone before. Because when a Ka-tet breaks, the end always comes quickly. Say sorry." And I don't know if you've ever seen this artwork of the five of them standing in a circle around the trike here, but it is beautiful and terrible.
No, I haven't. I've never seen it.
It's
I mean, it's really kind of, Scott put it on in the notes so that I could see it. And like when I was doing the notes, I just like probably stared at it for a good 5 minutes, because it's such a fascinating piece of artwork, right? Like it's heartbreaking, obviously, because you're seeing all these characters you love. You know that this is the last moment they're all going to be together and something terrible is going to happen. But like the composition of the image is fascinating, because top half is like golden light with them embracing and smiling. And there's just this pile of dead bodies in the bottom half. and some of them have animal heads because they're Tahine, obviously. But it's like, it's such a, like, again, this is the sort of thing where like if you showed it to somebody who didn't know anything about the Dark Tower, they'd be real confused about what they're supposed to feel about this, And sure. I don't think that's unintentional. I think that like our heroes and our villains have been sort of, lines have been drawn between them here in some ways that make it very difficult for us to just have uncomplicated feelings about everything.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, the thing I can't get over is the smile on Eddie's face. And like, it feels like the artist here really wanted to accentuate this happy smile on his face, this moment of victory, this moment of pleasure before everything's about to go bad.
Yeah.
And I can't get over that. I do also want to talk to you about like the say sorry at the end of this line that King says, you know, because when the Ka-tet breaks, the end always comes quickly. Paragraph break, then say sorry. And he's apologizing to you. He's apologizing for what he must do or what must be done. And I find that so powerful because I think you were absolutely right in what you said before is that Stephen King doesn't want this to happen either. This is probably immensely devastating for him as well. But this is the type of writer he is, right? We've called him a pantser. He is not the type of writer that plans and structures everything out. He's the type of writer that feels this. And in this particular case, he probably decided that Eddie Dean was going to die or decided that it must end. Eddie Dean's life must end here maybe 2 books ago, right? Because he's kind of been slowly building to it since then. But it has to happen and he knows it has to happen. And he's apologizing to us for doing this to us. And I don't know, like, I think he's also, he's taking responsibility for it, which is really fascinating.
He's taking responsibility. I mean, obviously, you know, who else could be responsible? But yeah, but it's really interesting. It works into this idea that he's channeling the story, right? Mm-hmm. Where he's like, you know, it has to be this way. It has to be this way. Like to do otherwise would be to go against Ka, right? Which you can't go against Ka. It's impossible.
No, you cannot.
So.
All right, Matt, here we go.
Okay.
He caught movement from the corner of his eye, and as he did so and saw another one, the boss of the show had struggled up onto one elbow. His gun, the Peacemaker 40 that had once executed a rapist, was leveled. Eddie's reflexes were quick, but there was no time to use them. The Peacemaker roared a single time, fire licking from the end of its barrel, and blood flew from Eddie Dean's brow. A lock of hair flipped on the back of his head as the slug exited. He slapped his hand to the hole that had just appeared over his right eye, like a man who has remembered something of vital importance, just a little too late. So Eddie gets shot, and we gotta talk about this moment. And unfortunately, because King is an absolute monster, the death of Eddie Dean is going to extend well into the next chapter. But this is the moment where everything changes.
Yeah,
and we've got to talk about it.
I mean, I mean, first of all, it's a good point that like it's a sudden, shocking, horrible thing, and then you think of a gunshot to the head as being a thing that just kills people instantly, but King actually twists the knife by making it last a whole other chapter. So, I mean, there's so much to say about the way this is done, and unfortunately, the only way you can really productively talk about things in this format is in sort of an analytical way. You can't just say over and over, like, man, this is sad. That would be boring. So like analytically, like, I think this is like, from my point of view, one of the most difficult things about writing, for me at least, is always how to do the moment of impact, you could say. Like, you're trying to hit the reader with a particular event and you need it to affect them emotionally. How do you do that, right? There's a million ways you can do it, right? You can be melodramatic, or you can be terse and minimalist with it, and you know, let it hit them that way. You can focus on the physical details of the scene and let them kind of construct their own emotionality, or you can focus on the characters and their internal states and their reactions. You can include a lot of details. You can just do the broad strokes. You know, there's a million ways you can do a moment like this. And so the way King chooses to do it, the things he chooses not to include tell us just as much as the things he chooses to include, right? So, I mean, as you pointed out, like, the focus is drawn to the gun again. We spend it's the Peacemaker 40 cal that once executed a rapist. That's about 10 words taken up out of what is really a pretty short paragraph dedicated to the gun. So just think about how much attention in just a, you know, percentage sense is being paid attention to this symbol that we've traced through. And then the damage that is inflicted on Eddie is described in these very clinical sort of realist terms, a lot of visual imagery. So like you can't help but visualize this. The flame licks out of the gun. The effect on Eddie's head is described very visually. Entry wound, exit wound, blood spray, flinch reaction, all these things force you almost to visualize it.
Yeah. I think you're right. Like it's almost intentionally unartistic. It's clinical and mundane in a way that forces you to see it all exactly the way it happened.
Yeah, exactly. It's painting. This is one thing that I notice a lot in writing is like where authors choose to paint a picture with words versus just give you the vague impression of what happens, and then you can either choose to imagine it or not. It doesn't really matter because the visual details aren't important. And that's the thing that he focuses on here in this paragraph, at least, is just the physicality of it. After this paragraph, we get we see the others' reactions to what's happened, and that's its own thing, right? That's, if anything, for me, that's where the emotions hit. This is just a kind of cold shock, and then the actual emotions hit after this moment. Yeah. And that's something I want to really spend some time talking on in the next chapter, because one of the things that I've come to realize when it comes to character death is that the thing that breaks me is not losing the character themselves. Because like I could just pull the drawing of the three out right now and there's Eddie Dean and he's alive again. Right. Yay. The thing that actually breaks you is the other character's reaction to the death. The thing that, like, the part that made me cry was not Eddie getting shot in the head. The part that made me cry was the other character saying goodbye to Eddie in this upcoming chapter. And so I think that's something that King absolutely understands. And so he makes this entire next chapter about Jake's reaction to the death and Susanna's reaction to the death and Roland's reaction to the death. And that is the part that really just rips your heart out, I think. I agree. In fact, I have a lot to say about that when we get there.
Yeah, we'll get there. One thing I do want to touch on before we move on here is just the way in which it feels like Ka has abandoned Eddie. Because like this line, Eddie's reflexes were quick, but there was no time to use them. And you're just like, wait, no, that's not how this works. Like, he's got gunslinger reflexes. He's supposed to be able to move fast enough to dodge these things. Like, even back when they got ambushed back in Song of Susanna, like, Eddie hit his head, and so he was unconscious, and so he collapsed like a rag doll, and so the bullet that would have taken out his head missed. Like, this is not the way this works. It's not supposed to work this way. And then suddenly it doesn't matter. Like every other sentence up until this point in the book would have said Eddie's reflexes were quick and he moved out of the way. But in this time, it's Eddie's reflexes were quick, but there was no time to use them.
Yeah.
And that signals a shift, a change in everything that's going to happen from now on.
Yeah, it's interesting to point out that prior ambush and how he, quite literally dodged a bullet, if only by accident. Just like the story contorted itself to keep him alive there. It's almost like King is saying, you can almost imagine him saying, like, look, I've done all I can for this guy. People keep trying to shoot at him, and I just can't save him this time,
Right. Yeah, I mean, how many of the gunfights that Eddie has been involved in throughout the series has he gotten really close to getting shot? Yeah. I mean, even back in the drawing of the three, like the first gunfight he's in at the beginning of that book, he gets really close to getting shot a bunch of times. Yeah. But the story had use of him. The story needed him to do more things, and so he dodged those bullets. And now the story is done with him, and so his reflexes no longer matter. Yeah,
right. And I think the story. I mean, to be fair, I don't think the story has ever really said that he has reflexes on the order of Roland's. He does have really great reflexes, but like I feel like Roland would have just the text would have been like, and then faster than the human eye could possibly perceive, Roland drew and fired and killed the guy. That's because that's who Roland's character is. Roland's you can't get the drop on Roland.
Yeah,
you just can't.
But Pimley does, because Roland doesn't see that this happened. It's not like Roland saw it too and his reflexes were too slow.
Yeah.
He doesn't know until he hears Eddie shot.
Right.
That's when he turns around and then immediately, quickly, faster than the human eye, puts a bullet in Pimley, but it's too late.
Absolutely. You can always get the drop on Roland's friends. Just not Roland himself. Like that's the tragedy of Roland.
I mean, that's perfect, because I think you're absolutely right that if Pimley had like risen up and pointed the gun at Roland, he would have seen it.
Yeah, sixth sense caused him to turn around at the last second, right? Yeah.
Or someone would have jumped in the way of it, or some other thing would have happened. Yeah, but not when you're friend of Roland. Yeah. Friend of Roland is not a great place to be.
Exactly.
Yeah. All right. So let's move on to the next chapter. Chapter 12, the Tet breaks, which is just the most heartbreaking. Like, you leave the chapter maybe thinking, okay, he just got shot, but he's going to be fine. And then you turn the page and the next chapter is the Tet breaks. And you're just like, okay. Fine.
Great. Yeah.
So we begin this next chapter in Jake's point of view. And that is basically where we're going to stay for practically all of the chapter. I think we hop into Roland's head like once or twice, but we stay mostly in Jake's point of view throughout all of this. And it's a really fitting choice, I think, to absorb this death. It's the youngest member of the Tet. His grief is just as real as the rest of them, but also he's confused. He's doesn't understand why this is happening. And I think it fits how we feel, right? Why is this happening? Why now? The Jake that we see at the start of this chapter is actually of two minds here, just like Jakes we've seen in the past. He's arguing with himself about what happened here. And we have this moment that opens the chapter. No, denied the second voice, the one that used to assure him feebly that there was no such thing as monsters. No, that can't be. Eddie's Eddie. And besides, he's Ka-tet. He might die when we reach the Dark Tower. We all might die when we get there, but not now. Not here. That's crazy. And I love this idea, Matt. I love this idea that this Jake has for a long time felt that he would die. I mean, he's already done it twice.
Yeah.
But not here, not now. That's for the end of the journey. That's when we die, not now. And it's heartbreaking.
Yeah. Jake's grief, some of the most real writing I think I've ever encountered. I don't think I'm being hyperbolic there. I really stand by that. I mean, every time I've brushed up against grief in my life, it has been like this. It's been confused. It's been confusing. There's always 10 different emotions. There's 10 different distinct sources of pain that are all jostling for attention, and they're all urgent. They all need addressing. And Jake doesn't even know what to do with the first one of these, right? Yeah. And so he just ends up kind of both physically and mentally stumbling around between these pain points in this fugue state. I found it very, very relatable, certainly in contrast to like 99% of the like fantasy that I read, where like somebody dies and it's like, this is tragic, but we must avenge our fallen brother. And it's like, nobody feels anything. There's certainly no confusion about it. There's certainly no like difficulty in processing the emotions. It's just, it's all, so this is just great. I mean, it's heartbreaking. It cuts your heart out. Absolutely. But it's fantastic writing.
Yeah. I mean, I think one thing that is absolutely true about Eddie Dean is that Stephen King loves this character, right? And I think part of Jake's point of view here has to be Stephen King's point of view. Like, he's heartbroken. He's grieving as he's writing these words. And I think that really reflects on the page, I think.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Jake here, we see, can't even really be happy about their victory. The beam is safe, Shimi has told him. They're one step closer to saving all of existence. But Jake says here the loss of Eddie was too great a price to pay even for such an outcome. And the breaking of the Tet was an even greater price. So, like, it's such a, of course, understandable human reaction, right? Like, you just saved existence. You just saved the universe. Yeah, but I lost my best friend. And so that's a price I would never pay that price. It's so human and so heartbreaking.
Yeah, absolutely. That's as he's pointing out here, there's the loss of his friend Eddie, and there's the loss of sort of the unit that they have been with, and all these different different sources of pain throughout.
Yeah. I love this where he's praying to God, to Gan, to the man Jesus, or to any and all of them to do a miracle and save Eddie's life. He even prayed to the writer, save my friend's life and we'll save yours. He prayed to Stephen King, a man he had never seen. Save Eddie and we won't let that van hit you. I swear it. It's heartbreaking. He even prayed to the writer.
Yeah.
Writes the writer.
Yeah. The writer had to write the sentence where his character's begging him to go back and erase the thing that he just wrote, and he says no. He says no.
Yeah.
I mean, fascinatingly, depending on how seriously you want to take the metaphysics here, the character promises, "Hey, we'll I swear we'll save you from that van." And Stephen King is like, "No, the van's got to hit me. Gonna let the van hit me. Have to do it." You know?
Yeah.
I mean, obviously the van already hit him at this point, but that's where we need words for that. We need, the Stephen King in the book is, Fred, right? Stephen King, the actual writer of the story, is Stephen King. And
okay, so when we say Fred King, we're referring to the character in the book.
Are they going to save? I'm actually very curious to see whether they save Fred King from getting hit by the van. I mean, I suspect Fred King will also be hit by the van, but not killed, just like Stephen King. But I don't know. For all I know, they just save him and he's totally fine, which would be really weird because then the book would be different. So I don't know. All I'm saying is that is up in the air at this point.
Sure. So the setup for this first part of the chapter is Jake is waiting outside for word from Roland that Eddie was finally going, and everything immediately following the battle is a memory to him. He's thinking back on it. And King, of course, does this trick kind of often, right? But I particularly love its use here. The confusion of the moments immediately preceding Eddie being shot are painted with the pain of foreknowledge because Jake is thinking back on them. Eddie is going to die. We all know he's going to die. He just hasn't yet. And we're turning over the moments leading to this realization in our heads as memory. And it makes those moments more barbed, more sharp than if King just let them play chronologically.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, I mean, if anything, at around this point, my reaction to learning that Eddie was in fact not already dead was like, oh no, oh fuck, you're gonna drag us through this, aren't you? You're gonna really make this hurt, which he does.
Yep, he absolutely does. We do see in this immediate aftermath memory, Susanna is just besides herself, understandably, and we see that Ted and Dinky attempt to soothe her using their magic powers to calm her down a bit. Susanna doesn't want it, though. She says, "You mustn't use your good mind to steal my grief, for I'd open my mouth and drink it to the dregs, every drop." And that is just heartbreaking. I mean, this is when I start getting fucked up, Matt, because this is like, don't make me feel better. I don't want to feel better right now. I want to feel this fully.
Yeah.
And of course you do. I think I find that very relatable, that like, I don't want some artificial means to take away this feeling I have, because this is all I have. This is all I have to feel about the man I love. And it's,
yeah. I mean, you even feel for Dinky and Ted here because you imagine yourself in their shoes, right? Like that's the thing that fiction does, is you pseudo involuntarily imagine yourself in the position of all these characters. You imagine, okay, well, this is horrible. I have psychic powers. I can make this easier for her. And then she says, no, don't do that, please. I want to feel this. And you're just like, I get it. Like, God, I mean, yeah, it's just the realism here is what gets me. Like, I really would, give a pinky finger to have been a fly on the wall while King is writing this part, just to see like, what is this? Is this easy for him to write? Is this incredibly difficult for him to write? Did this take him a long time to write? Is this something he came back to and edited for 6 months, or did it just flow out of him? Like these are the sorts of questions I have about this, because this is just such masterful stuff. Like I said, among the best writing that I've ever read. So I'm just like, what is it like? What is it like in the room when this is happening?
Yeah, and I think realism is a good word, and I agree with you. I'd love to ask him those questions. I think the one thing we didn't touch on when we talked about, the moment of him getting shot is this fact that the battle is won already. Like, this whole scene would be so different if Eddie like heroically sacrificed his life to ensure victory, right? Because like, yes, there would be grief. Yes, there would be tragedy. But like, as a person reading the book, you can kind of anchor your emotion in this feeling of, okay, but this was a necessary step to ensure the existence of everything, and you can hide behind that, and then Eddie becomes a tragic hero, or not tragic hero. Eddie becomes this wonderful hero that saved everyone. But that's not what happens here, right? What happens here is they've won already. It's over. And then Eddie is taken from them. It's meaningless. It's pointless. It is just death in the pure sense of death. And so you can't hide behind this heroism. Yeah. You can't hide behind this heroic sacrifice. There's nothing to hide behind except just the honest truth of it. And I think King realizes that, and that's why he really dives into the realism here with that, because it's just death. It's just death. It's meaningless. It's senseless. It's stupid.
It's not bittersweet. It's just bitter.
No. Yeah.
It's I mean, that's a really interesting point. I don't know why I didn't quite make this connection, but like, there's 50 movies, big popular movies that I could name where the ending is that the character heroically sacrifices themselves, and you're sad. But there's a kind of, you walk out of the theater feeling actually a little bit uplifted, right? But like, pick your favorite large comic book franchise moment where the character heroically sacrifices themselves to save everyone, and just imagine that they had saved everyone and then been shot in the back after that salvation had occurred. How different would that feel, right? You would walk out of the theater sad and angry and arguing like, why'd they do that? God damn it, why did they have to do that, right? Why did that have to happen? Completely different tone, right? Completely different feeling. That's a really good point. Like, I'm kind of evaluating that out in my head and realizing, that's absolutely it. There was no need for this. It's just pure tragedy.
Yep. It's only going to get worse. We've got like half this chapter left, and I'm just dreading the things that I know that are coming up. Yeah. But first, Roland and Jake are going to go around the Devar-Toi, cleaning up, finding the remaining hidden guards, and removing them. And it says here that they flushed another 14 guards in the next 3 hours, most of them Humes. Roland surprised Jake a little by only killing the 2 who shot at them from behind the fire engine that had crashed with one wheel stuck in the cellar bulkhead. The rest he disarmed and then gave parole, telling them that any Devar-Toi guards still in the compound when late afternoon change of shift horn blew would be shot out of hands. So he didn't kill them all. He lets them go. Why didn't he kill him, Matt?
Maybe he lost his appetite for killing after losing Eddie. I mean, also, I on reflection on your question, I just realized that he doesn't often kill people merely as a punishment. Like either it's in a battle or like there's always a pretty evident reason why. Like I can only really think of Jack Mort as being an example of a dude who just needed killing. But I don't know. Did you have an answer, or was this kind of more of a let's see what Matt thinks about this?
This was a let's see what Matt thinks about this. Right. I mean, I do like that. Like, it surprised Jake a little, right? It does the M dash a little. It's like, it's not like he's totally surprised. He's just a little bit surprised. And I think you're right about that. I think he doesn't kill unnecessarily. But I mean, I think there is a version of like I think Jake probably wants to take out his anger and grief out on some of these guards, right? And you would think maybe Roland would want to do that as well, but he doesn't. He's just methodical in what he does here.
Yeah, it would be understandable. Like it wouldn't surprise us at all if it were like, and then Roland went and executed everybody who was in the compound, including the ones who were begging on their knees. Yeah, but no, he doesn't.
All right, I have to read this part now.
Okay.
This is just going to be me increasingly not enjoying doing this podcast for the next 20 minutes or so. Now, sitting with Oy outside the empty Clover Tavern with its neon beer signs and silent jukebox, Jake reflected on how right Roland had been. and how grateful Jake himself had been when, after 45 minutes or so, the gunslinger had looked at him, seen his terrible distress, and excused him from the room where Eddie lingered, giving up his vitality an inch at a time, leaving the imprint of his remarkable will on every last inch of life's tapestry. And I don't really have anything clever to say here other than like that last sentence, like just broke me in a way that I have not been broken before while reading these books. This time around, that like giving up his vitality an inch at a time, leaving the imprint of his remarkable will on every last inch of his life's tapestry.
Yeah. It's such an artistic and beautiful way of saying, you know, clinging to life, right?
Yeah.
But clinging, like that phrase, but turned into something sort of beautiful and amazing, you know?
Mm-hmm.
It's as we move into this part, as I was going to say earlier, like I agree with you 100% that the part when I start crying is always the part where we see the reactions. Because I think it's like a basic rule of drama, which I frankly don't know if I've ever seen actually articulated anywhere, but like it's obviously correct. Like in a movie, you don't cry when the bad thing happens. You cry when you see our beloved characters reacting to the bad thing. And the same is true in books, even though you can't visually see it. Here we're observing Jake's inner reaction, and that's what gets our motor going. And then also like, it's not just that we're seeing Jake's inner reaction. The specific thing in this paragraph that you pulled out that affected me actually was how Roland sees how destroyed Jake is and excuses him. And to me, that's like a little mirror the King's put into the story where you're in Jake's head. You get an internal sense of how miserable he is. But then seeing Roland to see how miserable Jake is, that's like an image to me. That's like, oh, he's visibly upset. That makes me even more upset. Does that make sense?
Yeah. No, I think it does. I think especially since Roland is the type of guy who I think, you know, a couple chapters ago, Jake said that everything is a test to Roland. Roland is constantly testing you and constantly trying to make you learn. And it seems like this would be a moment where Roland would just be like, no, you gotta be tough, kid. You gotta tough it out. And this is going to be awful. It's going to be terrible. You gotta tough it out. But Roland here sees how bad things are, how bad Jake is doing, and lets him go, like treats him like a child for perhaps the last time. Right. And lets him leave this terrible room until it's time. And yeah, it makes it more real. It's up in your face. I think you're absolutely right there. That's well said. I love the putting a mirror up to it. Yeah,
I like what you said. Like this is not a time for lessons. This is just too raw for everyone.
Yeah. I also love this part where Jake tries to understand if Susanna would blame Roland or hate him. He says, would she be grateful? It was down to Roland that Eddie Dean was lying on his deathbed at the age of 25 or 6, wasn't it? On the other hand, if not for Roland, she would never have met Eddie in the first place. It was all too confusing, like the idea of multiple worlds with New Yorks in every one. It made Jake's head ache.
Yeah, it's interesting. And if I'm to answer Jake's question here, I would guess, you know, maybe there's both some gratitude and some blame, you know. You can have contradictions like that for sure in a person. And then a question that occurred to me is like, okay, well, do we blame Stephen King for this scene? Because Stephen King is now making us sad, and because Stephen King introduced us to Eddie Dean. He made us love Eddie Dean, and then he took Eddie Dean away from us. Do we blame him for that? I think it's actually a very similar question.
Yeah. I mean, to me, this is the first bit of this kind of contradiction that I think culminates in the moment of Eddie Dean's last words that we'll get to in a minute, where he says, "Thank you for my second chance." You know, which is like, because I think you want to hate Roland for, like, Roland drew this character into the story, made us fall in love with him, and then the story said that he has to leave now. He has to die. And so we want to hate him for that. Yeah, totally. But like, also, like, if at 26 left in New York, would Eddie Dean have just OD'd on heroin and died? Like, possibly. Like, he gave him something immeasurable as well. And so there's this contradiction here, and you don't know what to do with it. You don't know where to put your emotion here. You just don't, because it is undoubtedly true that Roland saved Eddie from himself in many ways.
Yeah.
By bringing him into the story. Yeah,
I mean, I think the confusion is the point here.
Yes,
like because this is what it feels like. Even for much lesser losses than the death of a loved one, there's always internal conflict. There's always contradiction, and it's never just clear. If it's clear and easy, then I don't need, like, to me, it's not even really grief if it's clear and easy. Like, to me, the nature of grief, like the texture of grief, to me, is inner confusion. And I don't know if that's normal or if that's what anybody else feels that way, but if it's easy to sort out and process, well, that's not grief to me. I mean, obviously I'm not going to gatekeep grief for people, but I just know that, like, the nature of why sometimes it's hard to process something is that you have many different feelings that don't necessarily even go in the same directions. And that's what we're seeing in our character here.
Yeah, I mean, I do think that, like, every relationship we embark upon in our lives have a tinge of this, right? Where, like, you are choosing to emotionally invest yourself in something that will not be forever, one way or another, right? Like, either you're going to cause terrible grief in someone else by eventually dying, or you're going to cause terrible grief to yourself by losing that person, right? That's going to happen to all of us one way or another. And we all do this again and again. And I think reading stories is a lot like that. It's like every time someone picks up the Dark Tower again, they are knowingly putting themselves on a quest that is going to end with being devastated at Eddie Dean's death all over again. Mm-hmm. And yet we do it every day, because that is part of living, is like enjoying the moments, enjoying the amazing, incredible moments of Eddie Dean being a stone cold badass, of being a hilarious jokester, of being this warm-hearted, wonderful husband. He is amazing. And if what I need to do to get to experience Eddie Dean, the human being and the character in the story, is also experience his death and how that rips my heart out, well, then that's a price I'm going to pay, obviously, since I've revisited this series over and over again. Yeah.
I exactly right. Like, I mean, King's not literally asking us to ask that question of ourselves, but I can't help but draw the parallel between, you know, how does Susanna feel about this and how do we feel about this?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So after Roland lets him leave the room, Jake shares a smoke with Dinky Earnshaw as we catch up to the present of our story. And there's a lot here. And a lot of what is here right now kind of goes to demonstrate just how broken Jake is in this moment. I really love this moment where he's smoking, and it says the smoke still burned, but not so harshly as the first time. His head only swam a little, and he didn't cough. Pretty soon I'll be a natural, he thought. If I ever make it back to New York, maybe I can go to work for the network in my dad's department. I'm already getting good at the kill. And we know how much he hates his father. We know how much he hates the professional people like his father, right? And so this is just an image of a broken man, right? That, like, is now like, when I get back to New York, maybe I'll just go do this. Maybe I'll just go do this because I just don't fucking care anymore.
Yeah. God, this is one of the saddest bits from the whole day, you know, Jake sinking into nihilism, Jake actually smoking the cigarette instead of just kind of pretending to, just Jake just embodying fuck it. Yeah, I mean, I feel in this moment like all the stuff setting up his father as the guy who was, you know, the network man going for the kill. I feel like that was setting up this turn of Jake's character. Yeah, a million pages later, this moment of Jake being like, "Oh yeah, I guess I'm no different now," which isn't true, but that's how he feels.
Yeah, Yeah, and it's devastating. Absolutely. And I mean, and he goes on to like think about, he says, tonight the world seemed made of death. All he sees around him is death. Mia died. Callahan died. Eddie was dying. All the bodies lying out there under blankets while thunder rolled like bones in the distance. He thought of the man who'd shot Eddie, snap rolling to the left as Roland's bullet finished him off. He tried to remember the welcoming party for them back in Calibran Sturgis, the music and dancing and colored torches. But all that came clear was the death of Benny Slightman, another friend. And like, we've long had this phrase, gunslingers deal in death, right? That's what they do, right? And I don't think for Jake, it's ever been something he fully comprehended until this moment, that like the way of the gun is the way of death. Death surrounds you. All there is death. And I love this image of him trying to go back to this moment where Roland danced the Kamala. And it was this beautiful moment. And I think it was one of really the last moments of unquestionable happiness amongst the Kala. And it had nothing to do with them, you know, having a violent victory. It's just like this moment of peace and happiness. And he can't even summon that. He can't.
Yeah. 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 It's like you said, it's miserable. It's so sad. It's you really feel for the boy, because I mean we've almost departed in this moment, you know, in this, you know, page of text from Eddie, and we're just understanding how sad Jake has become, and you know how sad his life has become, really, because I mean, think about this whole week's reading from his point of view. Like, he's this kid, like he's a young man, but he's a young man who's like literally hasn't really fully begun puberty yet. And they're just like, here's your gun, kill everyone who has guns. Like that, like he's a child, you know, he's a traumatized child soldier, right? He's like this book can definitely be fun, and it's very easy to forget the situation. But the situation is that they have this traumatized child soldier who's died twice in their entourage, and they keep handing him a gun and saying, all right, you need to help us kill these guys now. And he keeps doing it, and it's just wearing him down, right? And now he's lost his friend, and he's wearing him down even more. And he's kind of, I mean, I think it's safe to say he's worn down now. He's breaking.
Yep. And well, now he's going to have to get a little more broken, because Jake hears from Roland. He sends him a mental message, actually, that Eddie is going. It's time. And so now we walk into the death room. And I really don't want to do this. I really, really don't want to do this, Matt, but we have to. So we see Eddie lying there, and he's barely conscious, but we do see him snap back into clarity one last time to tell his friends and family goodbye. And so he sees them one by one. He starts with Susanna, telling her he will wait for her in the clearing at the end of the path. And their moment together is absolutely beautiful. The touch that really, really got me this time is when he like summons the strength to tug on her curls one last time. Like he has the strength to lift his arm and just like grab hold of her curl just one last time. It's a beautiful moment, and I think like we're seeing this all through Jake's point of view, and he says something to the effect of, I didn't copy it, but he's something to the effect of like, if her hair was pulled tight because of like the weight of his arm, she made no notice of it or something. And it's just, I think that's like this perfect, wonderful detail that really goes to how the characters are feeling. Like, he doesn't have to say that Susanna is trying hard to keep strong for him in this moment. He just says that like he just kind of yanked on her hair and she makes no notice of it. And I think that's just a perfect way of showing her emotion without coming right out and telling it.
Yeah, I agree. That's perfect. Yeah, I mean, as you say, like that's like the first thing that happens in this sequence, and it's already destroying us.
Yep.
And you know, as the first time reader here, like I'm going into this scene and I'm like, this just gonna get worse from here.
Yeah. So Jake then steps over and he wants Eddie to wait for him too. He says, "Wait for me too," Jake said through numb lips. Okay, Eddie, we'll all go on together. We'll be Ka-tet just like we were. He tried to smile and couldn't. His heart hurt too much from smiling. He wondered if it might not explode in his chest the way stones sometimes exploded in a hot fire. He had learned that little fact from his friend Benny Slightman. Benny's death had been bad, but this was 1,000 times worse. 1,000,000. It's just like I love that King keeps channeling back to Benny Slightman, right? This death that obviously horribly affected Jake, because he just keeps going back to it. Even this little factoid about stones that exploding in a hot fire. You've talked many times throughout the show about how you think that King captures the way the brain works in a very realistic way.
Mm-hmm.
And I think this is another example of it, right? Where this random factoid just pops into your head. Like he wondered if it might not explode in his chest the way stones sometimes exploded in hot fire. And then you kind of unravel in your mind where that came from. And you kind of see that it was like the subconscious linking to something that affected you earlier. And it's just, it makes it all real. It makes it all realistic, and it makes it horrible.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, couldn't have said it better. Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So when it comes to Jake, though, he isn't just saying goodbye. Eddie is also giving him a warning. He says, Dandello, eyes widening, enormous effort. Protect your din from Mordred, from Dandello. You, oi, your job. His eyes cut to Roland, then back to Jake. Shh, then protect. So we, like Jake, don't really know what to do with this yet at all, right? Like this is just information. Like we don't know who Dandello is. Like this is we don't know what that is at all. So
yeah, it's plot, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I wonder, speaking of plot, like for a second I was like, was Finley the Taheen we were supposed to go slow past? Because I'm still paying attention for Taheen, but yeah, I don't know. I think the reason why I thought of that here is it's a warning. It's a
Mm-hmm.
warning about a specific thing in the future, but we don't know what it is yet. So we're just like, okay, well, I guess I'll pay attention for that.
Yeah, and it's interesting that he keeps this warning from Roland, right? Like his eyes cut towards Roland, then back to Jake. Shh, right? Like he we don't see that Roland hears this, right? Like, and I don't think he does. That this is not like he's not telling Roland, hey, look out for Mordred, look out for whatever Dandello is. Like he says, protect your din. This is your job. You and Oi, this is your job. Protect your din.
Okay.
But don't tell him. So why?
Yeah, that's interesting. I don't. I honestly, I think that in my brain, this room was so small that there was no way that Roland wouldn't have heard him. But I now that you have said that, I think your reading is correct. That he meant don't tell Roland. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I think he specifically lowers his voice here for this.
Yeah. Gotcha.
So lastly, he gets to Roland himself, and I'm just going to read all of this, Matt. Never, ever had Roland seen an eye so bright, not even on Jericho Hill when Cuthbert had bade him a laughing goodbye. Eddie smiled. We had some times. Roland nodded again. You, but this, Eddie couldn't finish. He raised one hand and made a weak twirling motion. I danced, Roland said, nodding. Danced the Kamala. Yes, Eddie mouthed, then drew in another one of those whooping, painful breaths. It was the last. Thank you for my second chance, he said. Thank you, Father. That was all. Eddie's eyes still looked at him, and they were still aware, but he had no breath to replace the one expended on that final word, that Father. The lamplight gleamed on the hairs of his bare arms, turning them to gold. The thunder murmured. Then Eddie's eyes closed, and he laid his head to one side. His work was finished. He had left the path, stepping into the clearing. They sat around him in a circle, but Ka-tet no more.
Yeah.
Gosh. There's a lot to talk about here. Like we already talked about the second chance bit a bit, which is one of the things I really wanted to talk about. Like, thank you for my second chance. Like, I'm here dying because of you, but you also gave me a second chance. You gave me a life. You helped me. You fixed me in a lot of ways. And thank you for that.
Yeah.
It's beautiful. It's absolutely beautiful.
Yeah. Yeah.
And once again, we have, Eddie's final moments married, Jake's kind of trying to deal with this by the Kamala, right? Like the dancing of the Kamala is this watershed moment for all of them, clearly, because this is the thing that Eddie is thinking about as he goes, that this moment of Roland's dancing is something that is clear, imprinted on him in a very powerful way. And everyone did.
Yeah.
So.
This moment of just like goodness and beauty. The last kind of moment of pure beauty before I really think it's been kind of a relentless death march since then, basically, if you just think about the timeline. I mean, that father moment is incredibly impactful. Something that was set up back in a moment that was also fairly impactful when he first says it, but Roland doesn't hear him, and then he kind of plays it off like he didn't say anything, and then it comes back here, and he's like, yeah, he really, it is important to him that he say this to Roland, that Roland know that he feels this way about him. And that's, he doesn't even need Roland's reaction. He doesn't need to hear Roland say anything about it. He just needs to let Roland know that that's how he feels about him.
Yeah, I also love this moment at the beginning of it where, for the last time, Roland is going to compare Eddie to Cuthbert. And he's always compared him favorably to Cuthbert, and sometimes unfavorably in the parts where he annoyed him. But I even this is a moment in which Eddie Dean beats Cuthbert, right? Like never had Roland seen an eye so bright, not even on Jericho Hill, not even when Cuthbert gave me his final moments, when he bade him a laughing goodbye. Like, this is, Eddie Dean is brighter. There's a lot of light imagery here, right? His eye is so bright. The lamplight gleams on the hair of his bare arms, turning them to gold. There is this powerful moment of heaven, whatever we want to call it, of goodness, as he goes. And it's tragic and it's heartbreaking, and it is fucking me up right now as we're talking. But it is, the writing is just so good. Like, it's just so good. That's the thing about it, is like the analytical side of my brain is like, holy shit, these are like some of the best sentences ever put together. And then the emotional side of my brain is just destroyed. I mean, me too. That's I'm almost moment to moment flipping back and forth between them, because I really feel like you can just on a sentence by sentence level, analyze this and say like, okay, what can we learn from this? How do you make that? Because I don't know what it is about me, but I'm always approaching things from the angle of like, how do I tease out why this works so that I can use it in my own writing. And so that's one level on which I'm approaching it, but also I'm just, it's hitting me, right? It's hitting me just as hard. I mean, I want to talk about, Eddie Dean here for a second. Yeah, let's do it.
Because until we met Eddie, the Dark Tower was one thing. And after we met Eddie, it became something else. The gunslinger and our dour plotting protagonist through the drawing of the three up until we first meet Eddie is a different thing. And then Eddie brings humor, he brings liveliness, he brings a sort of modern wittiness to the story. It becomes a different story. He becomes one of the major characters, at times even feeling like the main character of certain books, like the drawing of the three specifically.
Sure.
And to be blunt, he's a much more approachable and relatable character, a much more kind of normal protagonist than Roland Deschain is. So like at times, many times, I think I might have said Eddie's my favorite character in this story, and now he's dead. Now he's gone. He's out of the story, and so he's a fictional character. But I still feel a loss there. I still feel he's gone. The story goes on, but Eddie is gone, and that is a loss, and it's painful. And then the analytical part of me steps back in and says, isn't it fascinating how that works too? How I'm able to feel that strongly for something that is an invention of the writer.
Yeah, I mean, they've still got to get to the tower. They still got to save Stephen King, and they still got to get to the tower. So we know, like, I think you're right that knowing the events that must occur and knowing that Eddie is not going to be a part of them makes that loss feel real. Because, like, you're right that, like, he's a fictional character. He's not really dead because he never really lived. But we're going to have to read more of this book. There are 400 pages left in the story that we're going to have to read that will not have Eddie Dean in them. And so that is a tangible physical loss. He's not going to be, I'm not going to turn a page and see an Eddie joke anymore. I'm just not going to. So that's gone. The only way I can do that is go back to a part of the story I've already read. And that is loss. Yeah, it is.
Well, and it makes the book feel, I don't know, we haven't got there yet, but I suspect it's going to make the book feel more like it felt before he was introduced, where, you know, everything is dire and dour and the humor is not present. I mean, we already see, like, Jake is miserable. Roland is heartbroken. Susanna is, like, not even herself right now.
Yeah, and we're separating her from them, right?
The Ka-tet is broken. You know, we saying the Ka-tet is broken tells me, like, there's barely even a reason to believe that she'll rejoin them. I mean, she may or she may not, is kind of what the story is saying. And yeah, like, it's just, it feels like the whole rest of the story might just be something very grim, because, I mean, I'm not saying there's not going to be any comic relief, but there might not be any comic relief. I don't know. You know, I mean, I feel in this moment like there might not be. It just might be. I mean, I think a lot about. We haven't talked about Lord of the Rings in a while, but people say Lord of the Rings is boring. People say that. People are crazy. The Mordor section, when Frodo and Sam get to Mordor, was some of the most powerful writing I'd ever read up to that point in my life. Admittedly, I was young, but it was not boring. It was certainly not boring. It was harrowing. It's this miserable slog of fear and discomfort and the destination isn't even a place you necessarily want to get to, you know, and it's just, and that, like, that's the feeling that I'm kind of like, is that where we're going? Are we going into Mordor? Are we going into the death march into Mordor? And yeah, like, because we've lost Eddie, we've lost the fun.
Yeah. I want to circle back around to what you said at the very beginning. Okay. I think I want to end this particular conversation just reinforcing that, because I think it is the most important thing about Eddie Dean is that the Dark Tower did not become the Dark Tower until Eddie Dean joined the story. I love the gunslinger for the book it is. I think it's fantastically written. It is a fascinating kind of tone piece, but it is so different from the rest of these books. We said that, I think you noticed that immediately upon opening that second book, that how different it was. Eddie Dean is a Stephen King protagonist. He is, in every stereotypical meaning of that phrase, Eddie Dean is a Stephen King protagonist in a way that Roland Deschain, you know, traditionally, classically was not. And so he was introduced into the story, and he made this story a Stephen King book. He made the Dark Tower what it was. And you're right, he's gone now, and we have to wrestle with that. We have to deal with that. We have to decide, okay, what is the Dark Tower without Eddie Dean in it? And we're going to find out. We have no choice but to find out. But it's awful. Yeah. It's awful.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Let's move on.
Okay.
Huh? Yep. Let's move on.
Sounds good.
So the story picks up 30 minutes later, as our group now recognizes that with this part of their quest done, they must save Stephen King and end fast. It's almost June 19th over in Keystone World, and they need to get Shimi and get over there quickly. But they're not a Ka-tet anymore, Matt, so they're going to split up. Jake and Roland are going to go save Stephen King. Susanna is going to stay behind and bury her husband and catch up with them at Fedek if they can't get back here. And so Susanna kind of leaves them with this line right here. "You better save him," she said. Both Roland and Jake could hear old sneak thief Detta creeping into her voice. "After what's happened today, you just better. At this time, And this time, Roland, you tell him not to stop with his writing, not come hell, high water, cancer, or gangrene of the dick. Never mind worrying about the Pulitzer Prize, neither. You tell him to go on and be done with this motherfucking story. I will pass the message on, Roland said.
I love that.
Yeah.
I do want, like, part of me wonders if King feels bad about this. Like he's the one writing and he didn't have to do it, but you know, what's the point of having a story if you're not, you know, if you're going to go easy on the characters?
Yep.
This whole,
he does feel bad. He does feel bad.
Yeah. I mean, he's having, I mean, the whole gangrene of the dick thing is like, he's handing Susanna shots at him. Yeah. Man. Ka's really fucked me up.
It's God, it's awful. But yeah, I mean, I think he feels bad. I think he's taking some much needed frustration out on himself for taking so damn long to finish the series, right? I think there's a lot of that's part of this, and of course, it's weighed down by the extra knowledge he has that he almost died without finishing it. So I do think a lot of this is working out his own disappointment in himself.
Yeah.
So as Roland and Jake prepare to go, a group of breakers meets them, demanding that Roland tell them what they're supposed to do now. They've had their purpose taken away from them. Their lives, they say. Now what? And Roland gives it to him. I'll tell you what I'll give, since you ask, Roland said. I mean to have this place where you have fed on the brains of helpless children in order to destroy the universe burned to the ground. Aye, every stick of it. I intend to send certain flying balls that have come into our possession to explode and blow apart anything that would not burn. I intend to point you to the way to the River Wye and the green callows which lie beyond it, and set you on with a curse my father taught me. May you live long, but not in good health. I fucking love it. I love it so much.
Fuck these guys.
Yeah, and then this little piece on the end of it, which I think caps this all off, is that Ted approaches Roland and says, what they did wasn't entirely their fault. I thought I explained that, but I guess I didn't do a very good job. Roland holstered his revolver. You did an excellent job, he said. That's why they're still alive.
God, that's so good. It's satisfying because Roland knows it wasn't entirely their fault, but that means it was partially their fault.
Yeah.
That's still pretty bad.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, just the timing of it, right? Like the battle is won. And these people now approach, like Roland is mourning his dead friend, and these people approach him and are just like, you took my purpose away, man. What are you going to do about it now? Like,
yeah,
it's just like, fuck you.
yeah. I'll put you out of your misery. How about that?
Yeah. Right. I do love, there's this part, I didn't pull it out, but there's this part where they reference Fahrenheit 451, right? Where they said like, just people like to burn books because it feels good to burn. And so they go back to it feels good to break, right? It feels good to be a breaker. It's kind of an addiction for them. And I think that's a nice cap on our talked about how Bradbury-esque this whole section was. And so that's a nice capper on this Bradbury-esque portion of the story where we conclude with another Bradbury reference.
Excellent point. Yeah.
So while Roland is projecting an image of where he wants Shimi to send him, Danny Rostoff, a young breaker, approaches Jake and kisses him. His first kiss, Matt, a kiss he will, quote, remember for the rest of his life. I thought this was I was really mixed on this, and I want to get your opinion on this whole thing and how it plays out.
I mean, it's a very sweet little moment, kind of punctuating the end of all this horror, and I think it gives us a slight sense that, okay, that was all awful, but look, here's a little pick me up. The rest of the story is not going to feel this way. It's not going to feel this awful, and we're going to move on with that. It's the what's the word? It's the there's a word for like the psychological effect of just ending things in a certain way, right? Like you want to make sure like the ending of a of an interview or whatever is good, because that's going to stick in their mind much more than the 45 minutes of you doing really well, right? Which is just sure. Unfortunately true. And so it's as he ends this chapter, he's ending it on a mild uptick, right? Mild uptick after pages and pages of misery and sadness and tragedy. So I think he's doing a specific thing there. That's my feeling. But what do you? You said you were mixed. I'm curious. Like what are your feelings about this?
I don't know, I mean, part of it is like we've kind of been rushing Jake through all the stages of moving on to adulthood, right? Like in this chapter specifically, he smokes a cigarette. He gives this adult laugh, and now he's gotten his first kiss, right? And so like this is definitely him. We talked. Wolves of the Calla, I think, had a lot of Jake kind of transitioning or these final moments of childhood, and I think with this first kiss, it feels like he's fully moved on from childhood, right? Like we didn't pull it out because it's kind of weird because this girl is so young, but like he feels her teenage breasts like push up against him, and that's like his first real like sexual like noticing moment, and that imprints on him as well, and so this is very much feels like, okay, Jake isn't a kid anymore, like he's just not anymore, like this is like the last real threshold that he's going to move in towards being just an adult, and so I think it's a little bittersweet. I don't know.
I don't know if I connected this to being another growing up milestone, but yeah, I think you're right on there. Yeah, sure. I like that.
And I liked when Ted winked at him and said, the first one is the one that you'll compare all the rest to, which is just adorable and true.
Yeah.
All right. So then Shimi sends the two of them back into the Keystone world. They arrive back in the East Stoneham General Store where Eddie and Roland had survived the ambush, which is King cruelly linking us back to Eddie again, reminding us about Eddie again, because the last time they were here, Eddie was here, which is just mean, Stephen. It's just mean.
Yeah.
But it's 4:19 p.m. on June 19th, 1999, and time is almost up. And that's where we leave the chapter and we leave the section behind.
Oh, man.
It's exciting.
It is.
All right. And that's it for us this week. That's it. We're done.
Yeah.
We've got some discussion question answers to read, but next year, we will be starting the next section. We'll be starting part 3 in this haze of green and gold, and we'll be reading the first 2 chapters of that. So we'll be doing that in 2021. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
All right. We made it.
All right. Let's go through the discussion question answers real quick, Matt. It's going to be another long episode, but I think we had to give this one its due, right?
Yeah,
we had to.
For sure.
So we asked the question, what is your favorite Stephen King memory of 2020? And before we get into these answers, I just want to say, y'all, no one's going to believe me on this. There's some people that like probably are just like, they were just fishing for compliments or something. I honestly, a lot of you said our podcast, and that's the nicest thing anyone's ever said to me. And I swear to God, I was not fishing for you to talk nice about our show, but thank you.
Yeah. Thanks. Yeah, it didn't occur to me at all that would happen. Actually, I was
me
like,
neither. Me neither.
Oh, and then I was like, oh, that makes sense, I guess. Yeah, that is. Yeah. Okay.
And all I was thinking about is like, oh, people are going to think we did this on purpose. And I swear to God, y'all, you don't have to believe me, but I swear I did not think about that at all. But thank you so much for your kindness.
All right, let's get into it.
Yep.
So Dark Gazing says, my favorite Stephen King moment of 2020, aside from If It Bleeds, every new book is a treasure, is the unbridled sass that is Cy King's Twitter timeline. When he said he'd be off Twitter until after the election, and then the results/forecast started coming through, I knew he was going to go all out and awaited it as eagerly as any new book. It was all this constant reader wanted and more. I'm not going to try and make the podcast political, but some highlights even Trumpers would have to concede as certified bangers include "Tell Trump to stop playing fiddly fuck," and the stone cold "You lost, you miserable self-entitled infantile fucker. Concede and get the hell out." Oh yeah, 2020 finally came through.
Stephen King's Twitter is a delight. And while I think Twitter is bad and terrible and I hate it, he is absolutely a Twitter highlight for me.
Yes.
He's good with words. Who knew?
That's right. I think everyone can appreciate a good burn, even if no matter who it's levied at.
Yes, it's great. Rob the Gob says, I've been reading King for a couple years now, but this year has seen quite a large influx in my intake of his work. I've listened to the audiobooks for novels I've already read, including the whole Dark Tower series, It, The Shining, and The Talisman. I've also read such novels as Revival, Gerald's Game, Misery, and over a dozen other King books for the first time this year. But if I had to pick a favorite King memory from this year, it would probably be reading Revival, and more specifically, the ending. I read the last 100 pages in a single setting and was turning the pages feverishly, wondering what was going to happen. That feeling of unease as I close the book still haunts me. It's such a great book. I hope to top myself on how much King I can read next year.
Cool. Dang,
Rob, you read more than me this year, and I read a lot. Revival is one of those books that sad to say, it's one of like the 4 or 5 remaining King books that I've not read ever. I'm going to get to it soon. I was actually going to prioritize it because I heard that Flanagan was making a Revival adaptation, but apparently that's dead now, which is sad.
Yeah. I haven't read any of these, but good work on the reading. Jerry Ruardo says, last year I decided to reread Stephen King books that I haven't read since I was a teenager 20 plus years ago. I'm great at forgetting the details of books, so often it's like reading them for the first time. For 2020, my SK highlight was rereading The Stand. I recognized a few of the names of important characters, but I had forgotten their roles and deeds, so I really enjoyed reading that again. I'm currently reading Under the Dome, which is new to me, but going forward with Stephen King material, I'm torn between jumping to other big-name novels I read when I was a teen, It and Desperation, or reading through his works chronologically. I know Matt also mentioned he's doing the latter. Any suggestions from fellow constant readers or the hosts?
It's me that's doing that, not Matt. I mean, so I'll say that I was specifically working them chronologically because I had this grand vision of reading/rereading every single King novel before Matt and I even started this podcast. So I'd be up to date and expert on every single thing King. That obviously didn't happen. It took far longer to read through the works than I thought it was going to. I mean, I would say just look at the list of books and reread the ones you're most interested in. Start there. I don't think you need to do it chronologically unless you're like trying very specifically to do the chronological thing. Like I was very much trying to analyze how King changed as a writer over the years. And so I was specifically reading chronologically for that reason. So I don't think you need to do that.
Yeah. I was just laughing at completely agreeing with the idea that forgetting details about books is a superpower because it lets you reread them with excitement. Like how we were doing
totally.
when we were doing the Worm podcast, and you'd have a theory and I'd be like, yeah, I can't remember right now whether that happens or not. So anyway.
It's awesome. Gilead 1973 says, my favorite Stephen King memory this year is getting my first signed book, End of Watch. I have been a constant reader for about 35 years and own almost all his books. I've always wanted to attend a signing event, but I haven't been able to. I recently joined a group on Facebook for rare editions as signed books. I hope to purchase a couple more in the coming years, hoping to get a couple of my favorites, and that will be good for me. I'm not really a serious collector like some people. I would just like a couple. That's awesome. Congratulations, Gilead. I actually have no signed copies of any Stephen King books, and it makes me sad. I should probably, I'm a bad collector. I'm bad at these kind of things. But I would like some signed editions. That'd be pretty awesome.
That's a fun idea. I only have one signed copy of anything, and that's Neil Stephenson book. That's a tangent. Emperor Fry the Solid says, so this year I've read a lot of King, thanks to my boyfriend turned husband. Thanks, 2020. Back in March, I got a sinus infection and thought, hey, I can finally get to that one big fat King book while I'm on sick leave. That's right. I blind started The Stand in March of 2020 and read it in one literally feverish week. Weirdly, it put a lot of COVID stuff into perspective even then. Survived my probably sinus infection and have gone on to acquire a whole bunch of Dark Tower background reading to accompany my weekly dose of Kingslingers. My other favorite new thing in 2020, besides the husband bit, thanks you too. You bring a lot of thought and joy to all of us constant listeners each week. Appreciate you. Say thank you. Thank you back to you.
Well done, Matt. Well done. Wow, lots of people reading The Stand again this year. I guess in preparation for the miniseries, which I have been watching, and we're going to find a way to do something on at some point. But if you want to hear some perspectives on The Stand, the Losers Club podcast is doing like an episode by episode review of it, and it's fantastic. I've been listening to them on the past 2 episodes, and they're really, really good. So go listen to the Losers Club.
Cool.
And y'all should just, if you aren't listening to that podcast already, you should do it because they're fantastic. They really are. All right, now we have Al 84001. I nailed it.
Yep.
My favorite King-related moment this year was discovering your podcast, binging all the episodes to catch up, and then being able to participate in the weekly discussion questions. It was especially enjoyable to hear your repeated attempts to pronounce my username. Nice. Can't wait to reach the tower with Yins. Keep up the excellent work. Now that I know you guys are Neil Stephenson fans, please do a show on the Baroque cycle. If you haven't read them yet, they're truly amazing. His best work. I'm sure, Matt, you have.
Of course I have. And that's a fun idea for me to at least consider. I hadn't thought of it at all. But it's incredibly long, so it's definitely following along our pattern of picking ungodly long things to cover. So
I've only read 2 Stevenson things. I've read Diamond Age and I've read Snow Crash. That's it.
Yeah, you're to Stevenson as I was to King.
Yeah, but I mean, I guess like the 2 things I've read, I think like are better.
Well,
than
and also what I read was like 2% of King's work, and you've read probably like 10% of Stevenson's work in reading 2 books.
Yeah. So there.
Okay, fine. Anyway, Pear Jane says, mine was today. I've just had a brilliant year of King, starting with revisiting his early work, discovering this podcast, and spending my 4-mile-per-day walks consuming this, the Kingcast, Mick Garris's podcast, and the Dark Tower audiobooks. Today, Pittsburgh was 50 degrees and steadily raining, not really Christmas Eve weather. But I set out with this episode, impervious in my rain gear, and headed for Frick Park. Aside from 2 runners who exited as I entered, I saw no one in the park. The weather and holiday kept everyone away. I hiked my way through, came back around, and saw a mist. Not the mist, just a mist, creeping into the meadow. I felt compelled to sit on a bench. I watched the mist roll in while rain fell on me, and listened to you 2 discuss Ted Broggin's backstory. For once in this awful year, on a dreary Christmas Eve, my heart was content, thanks to an empty park and a couple of guys who like reading and talking about reading even more than me. Thanks so much for giving your hearts and minds to this podcast and Midworld. You've been a shining touchstone in 2020, and for those 10 minutes a day, thanks to you, I felt the presence of the rose. Oh,
like I read all these already when I pulled them into the script, but then you read them out loud, and it's like, oh my god, and I'm emotional again. That's
yes.
I honestly I don't know how to react to this. Like I'm just like, thank you.
Comparing anything that I've made to the rose is like a literally overwhelming compliment. So yes, thank you.
Yes. Next up, we have Not Who You Know, who says, I have a lot of Stephen King related memories this year. I truly do think that my favorite memory, though, is discovering this podcast. Oh, it's another one that's going to make me feel awkward. It is truly a college level masterclass on the Dark Tower, and I love it, and I've suggested it to several friends. I binged this podcast. I've only been listening since September, and I'm all caught up. Also, this podcast has led me to 2 other King podcasts, Kingcast and the Derry Public Radio, which I only just started today, and has led me to my own King publication order reread, currently on Danse Macabre, one of the few I've never read completely. Thank you so much for this podcast. I have been a constant reader for most of my life since grade school and have read the whole Dark Tower series at least 5 times, and the first 4 books many, many more times than that. And this podcast has opened me up to a whole bunch of ideas that I hadn't had about the series before, and even a couple of ideas of my own that connect to later in book 7, so I won't talk about them here. Thank you for some awesome new memories.
That's great. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Groovy Cheese 6969 says,
best names, best.
Gonna be hopping in the car Thursday afternoons after work and hearing the opening chorus to the latest Kingslingers podcast. Your show has become something many of us look forward to, so thank you both. Like Scott, I've been rereading many Dark Tower related novels throughout the year and especially enjoyed Insomnia this time around. I remember slogging through it back in high school and considered it one of King's lesser works. Funny how different things seem 20 years later. Great story and always a joy to get more on the forces that move the tower. Finally, a special mention to Cy King's Twitter feed this year. The man is a national treasure. That's great.
It's wonderful.
It always makes me happy to hear that, like, of like a concrete setting in which people are enjoying, because then I can like visualize it, and
yeah,
it's just like we were talking about. If you can visualize it, then it's more dramatic.
Exactly. Up next, we have Cavoso, who says, at the start of this year, we all got thrown for a bit of a loop. As a teacher, I found myself at home, helpless, while my district scrambled to figure out how to handle the unknown. Needing something to do, I started filling the holes in my Stephen King reading. Sound familiar? And instead found myself rereading the Dark Tower series. Somewhere in the beginning of my reading, I found your podcast. I decided to see if I could get my fiancé to read them as well. He had not read any Stephen King books. Again, sound familiar? But as a fellow English teacher, I knew he would appreciate not only the series, but the accompanying discussion provided by you guys. Months and thousands of pages later, we finally listened to the last pages together. He is now my husband, and I am so happy we were able to take this trip with Roland's Ka-tet as we start our own. We have had many discussions and some arguments, but out of this dumpster fire of a year, I will cherish the memory of watching him, through slightly damp eyes, I am not ashamed to admit, listen to the final words of this book. And Scott, I shouldn't have worried. He loved it. Thank you both so much. I can't wait to continue to listen to Matt's reactions as we get closer and closer to the tower. That's adorable.
It's such a great story. Wow.
It is a wonderful story. You've listened to the final. I can imagine. I can close my eyes and imagine listening to the final words together. That's really, really wonderful.
Yeah, it's a beautiful idea. Yeah.
And congrats on your marriage as well. All these people get married.
Yeah. That is interesting, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, cool. That makes me happy. All right. Steve D says, in 2020, I have loved seeing Stephen King's tweets. It feels like we get an inside track on what he's watching, what he's reading, and his take on current events. Sometimes silly, sometimes serious, sometimes just him giving a quick opinion or jab at the president. Running up is the Kingslingers podcast. I so look forward to Thursdays to get your takes on the week's reading. I quickly blew through Wolves, Song, and Tower when they were released. Taking the time to reflect on your thoughts and thinking about the discussion questions has me enjoying the journey in a whole new way.
That's great.
Yeah,
That's
I mean,
wonderful.
there's definitely, I mean, even as the person doing the podcast, I like a good chunk of the reason for doing them in the first place is that I learn more. You know?
Yeah. Oh, totally. Like I doing this podcast has made me a better reader generally, but still, like, there's nothing like this kind of focused reading. Like, you can't recreate it without just doing it, right? Like, there's no other way to recreate this kind of thing. Yeah.
I mean, like I said, the books I've read, I don't remember unless I talk about them afterward in general.
Yeah. Crossland S says, I frankly think this is kind of impossible to choose, but I think it's fair to start at the beginning. I picked up and finished more King books this year and expanded into some of the old classics I hadn't touched, notably The Shining and The Dead Zone. But I also listened to this excellent podcast called The Kingcast. Needless to say, after I listened, I noticed an interesting cross-promotion on Twitter through one of the hosts whom I enjoy, saying he was talking about the Dark Tower on another podcast. I gasped, shook a bit, and saw the revelation that was Kingslingers. Listening to the episodes with Scott led me to move through the entire back catalog, pick up the Journey to the Tower once again, and read along with you folks week to week. You were drips of light in the dark sky that was this year. I'll be grateful for that for a long time.
That's great.
Gosh, thank you.
Yeah. I love the constellation of Stephen King podcasts. Makes me happy that this exists. And I think we've mentioned this before, but I just love how positive everyone is. Like all these Stephen King readers, all these constant readers are just like, I just love Stephen King.
It's wonderful.
Yeah, and it's refreshing. It's refreshing. Okay.
Yeah, I think I've said this before. I have been a constant reader, basically my entire life. But I've never really been involved in the fandom. Like, I just read the books and argued with my dad about why the Dark Tower is great and he's wrong. That's really been my extent of it, and occasionally talk to friends and my cousin about these books. But I've never been part of the fandom. I've never been part of the community. And one of the most amazing memories for me this year is just how incredible this community is. Like even using community is like loose, because like I go to the Reddit thread rarely, but it's just like fans, Stephen King fans are remarkable. And not just the fans. I think the Stephen King content creator community is also just incredible, right? Like there's a lot of Stephen King podcasts out there, and they're all wonderful. The people on them are wonderful. They like, there is really a community of Stephen King content creators, because like you see them retweet your stuff, retweet other people's stuff, like plug each other. Like it's just this wonderful place that I never knew existed until we started the show, and it's delightful to see. It's just so positive and so wonderful.
Very cool. Yeah. All right, Luke V says, I've mentioned in some of my responses to your questions that I am the father of twin girls, about 15 months old by the time this question might be read on the show. When we first brought the twins home after spending 6 weeks in the NICU due to them being born 7 weeks early, I'd only read 2 King books at that time, The Long Walk and It. During the long nights of my wife and I waking up, as all parents do, to take care of the girls and getting little to no sleep for weeks on end, I would listen to and read The Gunslinger to them. Over a course of time, which seemed both endless and only a few days ago, the girls grew up, and I was taking them out on walks around town. During those walks in the sunny spring/summer/fall days, I listened to about 25 King books, along with reading the physical copies of them when I was able to. While this isn't necessarily one singular moment of the past year, my favorite recurring King-related event was looking down at the stroller at my beautiful, perfect daughters, smiling and babbling to each other on our long walks throughout the year, while someone read a King book to me through my headphones. And on special occasions, I would hear you two fine gentlemen on my favorite podcast reading my responses to your questions as well. This year was obviously a shit show in so many ways, but at least for me, there was unimaginable beauty in some small, special places I just so happened to be lucky enough to be looking at during the right time.
You're all wonderful people.
Yeah.
That's wonderful. I'm a wreck.
Yeah. My youngest, my oldest was in the NICU for about that long. Almost exactly that long. And so anytime anybody tells me a story like that, I'm extra broken up about it. So glad we could brighten your life and you give those little babies kisses for me.
Yeah. 25 books. That's impressive. Eric T says, my daughter has started reading his books this year, which has been a fun ride for me, which means she is a little more keyed into noticing his name or seeing it on stuff. My wife, as a gift, got me the Stephen King triple pack bundle the other year. It comprised of made-for-TV King specials, It, The Shining, Salem's Lot. However, it was missing The Stand. Highlight of this year was my daughter texting me a photo of The Stand miniseries wrapped in cellophane in the $3 cheap bin at Walmart, asking if this was something I would be interested in. That's pretty exciting. Nice.
That's funny.
One day we'll watch The Stand miniseries, Matt. Both of them.
Yes. This okay. All right. Kristen1112 says, I have 3 favorite Stephen King moments from this year. I finally decided to make the pilgrimage to Bangor. I went on a Stephen King tour and ate moon pies and drank Moxie to get the full Maine experience. All of my inner geek fantasies were manifested. My favorite moment was hearing the story about the blue frog statue in Stephen King's front yard. It was a gift to him from the publisher to represent the frogs with teeth in my favorite novel, Do McKee. You need a Do McKee podcast, seriously. On the advice of Jamie the Guide, I listened to the audiobook of On Writing during my 8-hour drive home. Although Stephen King has narrated events from inside my head since I was a teenager, I finally got to hear his voice narrating his own life. That was memory number 2. But wait, there's more. Lastly, I discovered your podcast in mid-November and listened to all 49 episodes feverishly to catch up on the most recent episode. I brought you to bed with me every night, took many long drives, cackled wildly to myself on many occasions, and adored every moment. Please say Dan Titty and dedicate it to me. Your bugger. Well, Dan Titty, Kristen.
Dan Titty, Kristen. I love Kristen's name is Chris 10, 11, 12, which is just the best.
That is great.
Dan Titty. Last but certainly not least, we have Steve L., who says, it would have to be discovering your Kingslingers podcast. The only other podcast I've ever listened to is Fake Doctors, Real Friends with Zach Braff and Donald Faison. So I'm old school and new to podcasts. But your podcast has opened up a whole new way of comprehending not only the King world, but all books. I teach high school literature and have used some of your interpretations and techniques in teaching the book Dear Martin. Understanding writing styles and pointing out why I love certain parts has really helped students engage more and really get into the book. We've had great discussions around characters, predictions, and meanings behind scenes. So thank you for showing this old dog new tricks. Besides that, it's been a great distraction escape for me. I have just thoroughly enjoyed your format and flow, how much you obviously love good literature, how much fun you make book discussions, and how many different angles I've never thought of before, geeking out in such a fun way. Thank you and Happy New Year. May 2021 be much different and better. Oh, gosh.
Yeah. That's amazing. Wow. That to be told that we were having that sort of effect on young minds is really something. Yeah.
It absolutely is.
Thank you. Yes. And Happy New Year to you as well. Very, very much may 2021 be different.
Yeah.
God,
yeah.
please.
Before we wrap up here, I guess just like to wrap up the year, this is episode 51 of the show. So we're doing episode 52 next week. And that will be the 1 year anniversary of when we started the show, which means like we managed to get an episode out every week throughout this hell year that is 2020, which is something I'm very, very proud of. But, you know, when we started the show, we did not know at all what 2020 was going to look like. It's been a crazy, scary year for everyone, ourselves included. And to hear like what I imagined when I asked this question was like, this year sucked. Let's try to focus on some of the good moments. And that so many of y'all said, well, you were one of the good moments, like absolutely means the world to me. Like we're a tiny little podcast. And that we can have effects on people like this, like I'm still not used to that fact. Like I'm still not used to that we could have real impact in people's lives like this. And I take it seriously and I appreciate everyone's kindness. And it's been a wild year.
Yeah.
So thank you, everyone, not just the people that answered this question, but everyone who listens, everyone who sends in discussion questions, everyone who's enjoying this. Thank you all so much.
Yeah, thanks. And I mean, knowing that people are enjoying it and that it's making them happy is honestly the reason why every single week, even if maybe I'm not quite 100% feeling up to it, I personally am able to drag myself in front of the microphone and you know, of course I always feel great and I'm having a good time within a few minutes of starting. But
sure. Yeah, this is like we love doing this, but it's a lot of work sometimes. Yeah. And yeah, y'all's dedication to our show and y'all's kindness and the reviews and the excitement with which y'all answer the discussion questions keeps me going for sure.
Yep. I agree.
Yeah. So thank you everyone and Happy New Year. And let's move on to next week's discussion question, which is going to be a sad one. I couldn't not ask this question, Matt. You know that.
I know.
In honor of Eddie Dean, what is your favorite Eddie Dean moment in the Dark Tower? I think we might have asked this question before, but I don't care. I'm asking it again.
Twisting the knife again.
It's called remembering. Okay. It's called remembering and celebrating the life of an incredible character.
See, that's what I mean about grief being complicated. But anyway.
All right, folks, that is it for us this week and this year. Next year and next week, we are beginning the new year with a new part. We'll be discussing the first 2 chapters of part 3 in this haze of green and gold. We are just about exactly halfway through this book now, Matt. We've got 6 more episodes to go. So it's crazy. It's absolutely crazy.
Yeah. Remember, you can reach out to us via email at kingslingerspod@gmail.com or on Twitter at kingslingerspod. And of course, the Doof Media subreddit, reddit.com/r/doofmedia is a place to answer the discussion question or post your own threads about other stuff and see the other podcasts that we do on the network, because as we mention occasionally, we do other podcasts than these.
Mm-hmm. Nice. Well done.
Yeah.
If you are not already subscribed to Kingslingers, we strongly recommend you do so. Let's enter 2021 with a subscription, right? You can find us on iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, YouTube, Google Play, and pretty much anywhere in the world that podcasts are there.
That's right, Scott. And if you like any of our shows and you want to support them, your New Year's resolution can be donating every month of 2021 to patreon.com/doofmedia.
What are you doing this year? Are you going to work out more? No, I'm just going to donate some money.
I mean, charity is often overlooked.
Charity. please don't actually think we're charity. Yeah, donate money to an actual charity.
Yeah, there's no legal sense in which that would be valid. Special thanks to new patrons this week: Doof Dancer Richard K, and Doof Troopers Lolita B and Jacob O. Welcome. Great to see y'all. I hope you enjoy all the cool stuff that we have on the Patreon feed, and appreciate it.
Yeah, we got a new episode of Other Levels of the Tower coming up pretty soon, I think. Next week, maybe? I got to check on that.
Yeah, we got to record that, soon. Huh?
Yeah, we got to do that. If you cannot afford to donate to us right now, that is absolutely okay. You can instead help out by sharing this podcast with everyone. It's a new year. There's probably some new humans out there to listen to us, so share it with them. Or you can help us out by leaving us a rating and a review. This week's Spotlight review comes from Leeward Exshire, who gives us 5 stars and says, insightful and earnest father face remembering, a gateway drug to full-blown tower junkiism. This podcast offers both a way into the series for newcomers and the satisfaction of one more fix for those constant readers hooked through the bag and back again. Take it from a card-carrying member of the latter. You will enjoy hearing the chapter recaps, thoughtful discussion, and oftentimes eerily accurate predictions as they track the progress of this wonderful, entertaining, and heartbreaking epic series. There are other worlds than these, but only ours can call itself home to such an insightful and earnest examination of one of the most uniquely weird pieces of popular fiction to ever exist. I eagerly await reaching the tower with these two chaps. Though a few of us may have been there before, the joy of bringing someone new along the ride is well worth the cost of eternal damnation.
Oh, man.
As if people didn't already say a lot of nice stuff to us. Now we have a really wonderful review.
Now we just tack half an hour of complimenting ourselves on the end of the show. Now
We just were reading aloud compliments to ourselves for 30 minutes on the end of the show.
Intended to work this way, okay?
We did not. They're not going to believe us, Matt, but we really didn't. But once again, thank you, Leeward, for leaving that review on Apple Podcasts. Thank you, everyone who leaves reviews. Thank you, everyone who sends in these kind words. We get so many emails from people just like not answering questions yet because they're behind, but just saying, hey, I found your podcast. I'm like 10 episodes in. It's great. Y'all, those mean the world to us. We appreciate you all so much. I cannot stress that enough. I've said it like 20 times. I'll say it 20 more times before the end of this episode. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. And 17 more times after that.
Yeah.
All right, folks. We're done. We'll see you right back here next week as the remains of Roland's Ka-tet head to June 19th, 1999 and try and save Stephen King. Long days and pleasant nights.
May you have twice the number.